Who hurt her? Adrian Moretti crouched in the snow, his bare hands pressing against Elena's frozen face, and for the first time in 15 years, the most feared man in northern New York felt something crack open inside his chest. She wasn't breathing right. Her lips were blue. And the bruises along her collarbone, those weren't from a fall. Someone had done this to her. Someone who worked inside his house. If you love stories about powerful men who discover what truly matters, subscribe to our channel right now and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. Kim. Who hurt her? The storm hit northern New York the way bad news always hits, without warning and without mercy. By 9 o'clock that Tuesday night in January, the mountain roads leading up to the Moretti estate had turned into rivers of black ice, and the pine trees lining the property had bent so low under the weight of snow that several of them had already snapped clean at the trunk. The security lights along the outer wall kept flickering. The heating system in the east wing had been struggling since noon. And Adrian Moretti, sitting alone in the back of his armored SUV, as his driver navigated the last quarter mile to the main gate, was thinking about none of that. He was thinking about a man named Gerald Finch. Gerald Finch was 61 years old, owned 3 investment firms, attended church every Sunday in a city 2 hours south, and had personally ordered the execution of 4 people in the past 7 years. Adrian knew this because 2 of those 4 people had worked for him. That made it personal. And Adrian Moretti did not let personal debts go unpaid. The meeting tonight had ended the way most of Adrian's meetings ended, with silence and envelope, and the understanding that no further conversation would be necessary. Gerald Finch had agreed to every term. He had shaken Adrian's hand with both of his, which was the kind of gesture a frightened man made when he wanted to appear respectful. Adrian had smiled at him the way you smile at something that has already been decided. He was not a violent man by preference. He was a thorough one. "Mr. Moretti?" His driver, a thick-necked man named Carlo, glanced in the rearview mirror as they pulled up to the gate. "You want me to radio ahead for the gate detail?" "No." Adrian was already reaching for the door handle. "Just pull in." The gate slid open. Carlo eased the vehicle through. The driveway ahead was a solid sheet of white, unmarked, except for a single set of tire tracks from earlier in the evening. The security floodlights along the north wall were doing their job, throwing hard white circles across the snow. That was when Adrian saw something that shouldn't have been there. A shape, just outside the pool of light from the closest flood lamp near the stone wall that bordered the back service entrance, a dark shape against the white ground that was too irregular to be shadow and too still to be anything that was supposed to be there. "Stop the car." Carlo stopped. Adrian was already out the door before the vehicle had fully stopped moving, his dress shoes punching through the top layer of ice into the softer snow beneath. He covered the distance quickly. He was not a man who ran, but he moved fast when he needed to. He got close enough to recognize the uniform first, the gray and white of his household staff, and then he recognized her. Elena Voss, who had worked in this house for 3 years. Elena, who always moved like she was trying not to disturb anything. Elena, who brought his coffee at exactly the right temperature every morning and never once made a sound that could be called an intrusion. Elena, who he had almost certainly taken entirely for granted for every single day she had worked under his roof. She was on her side, one arm tucked under her body, the other extended in front of her, as though she had been reaching for something. Her face was turned sideways against the snow. She was breathing, he could see the faint cloud of it in the freezing air, but she was not conscious. And her face. Even in the harsh white glare of the flood lamp, he could see it clearly. The bruise along her left cheekbone that had gone purple at the center. The split at the corner of her lower lip that had bled and then frozen. The mark along her jaw that was too precise to be an accident, that had the particular shape of something intentional. Adrian crouched down and pressed 2 fingers against the side of her throat. Her pulse was there, thin, fast. He looked at her hands. Both of them were bare. No gloves. Her fingers had gone white with the beginning of frostbite. The service entrance was 40 meters behind her. She hadn't made it. He stood up. "Carlo." His voice came out completely level. He had learned a long time ago that the moments that mattered most required the most controlled voice. "Get Dominic. Get Dr. Harlan on the phone. And get everyone on house staff into the main hall. Everyone. Right now." Carlo was already moving. Adrian bent down and lifted Elena out of the snow. She weighed almost nothing. That was the thought that went through him as he carried her toward the main entrance, that she weighed almost nothing, and that someone had still felt the need to do this to her. He had asked one question in his head as he carried her, and that question was going to determine a great many things before the night was over. Who hurt her? Dr. Marcus Harlan arrived at the Moretti estate 40 minutes after Carlo's call, which was a record time, considering the roads, and he worked on Elena in the guest room on the second floor for just over an hour, while Adrian stood in the hallway outside and did not move. Dominic Reyes, Adrian's second-in-command and the closest thing he had to a friend, stood beside him. Dominic was 44, lean, careful with his words, and had been with Adrian for 16 years. He had seen Adrian angry. He had seen Adrian make decisions that ended careers, and on several occasions, lives. He had never seen Adrian stand still for 60 minutes and stare at a closed door. "She was out there for at least 30 minutes, Dominic said, keeping his voice low, based on the temperature and the condition of her clothing, Harlan's estimate. Adrian said nothing. The service entrance door was locked from the inside. She didn't go out through there. She went around through the east garden path, which means she left through the kitchen side door. Still nothing. "Adrian? Who is on kitchen staff tonight?" Dominic checked the small notepad he always kept in his jacket pocket. "Marisol Cruz, head cook, 2 assistants, both women, both been with us over 4 years, 2 delivery staff who left before 6, and Thomas Red, who handles the back supply line." Thomas Red. Adrian knew the name, the way he knew all the names of everyone who worked in his house, carefully, precisely, with specific detail attached to each one. Thomas Red. 38 years old, hired 14 months ago through a staffing agency that Adrian's housekeeper, Mrs. Fain, had vetted and approved. Good references, clean background check, quiet, competent. "Where is Thomas Red right now?" A pause. "That's what I was going to tell you," Dominic said. "He's gone. He clocked out at 6:30, which is normal for his shift. But Mrs. Fain says he came back. Someone on kitchen staff saw him in the lower hallway around 8:15, and he hasn't been seen since." The door opened. Dr. Harlan stepped out. He was a compact man in his early 60s, with a round face and careful eyes, and he had been Adrian's private physician for 11 years. He had signed documents he was not supposed to sign, and kept quiet about things he was not supposed to know. He was not a man who frightened easily. But he looked tired in a way that went past the drive through the storm. "She's going to be all right," he said. "The frostbite is superficial, caught early enough. No permanent damage to the fingers. She'll have full sensation back within a day or 2. He paused. "The injuries are more significant." "Tell me." 2 bruised ribs on the left side, bruising to the face as you saw, bruising to the upper arms consistent with being held forcibly, and... He stopped, glanced at Dominic, then back at Adrian. "There's older bruising. On her back and her upper arms. Different stages of healing. This was not the first time." The hallway was very quiet. "She hasn't regained consciousness yet," Harlan continued. "She's not in danger, but she needs rest and warmth. She needs to be in that bed for at least 24 hours. And Adrian." He hesitated, which was not something Harlan did often. "When she wakes up, she's going to be frightened. Someone should be careful about how she's approached." "Thank you, Marcus." Adrian opened the door to the guest room and looked in. Elena lay on the wide bed with 2 heavy blankets pulled up over her shoulders. Someone had cleaned the blood from her face. Her dark hair was spread across the white pillow. She looked smaller than she ever had during the 3 years he had seen her moving through his house. He closed the door gently. He turned to Dominic. "Find Thomas Red," he said. "Don't bring him here. I want to know where he goes tonight, who he contacts, and I want every conversation recorded. Don't touch him yet. Don't let him know he's being watched." Dominic nodded. "And Dominic." Adrian's voice dropped. "Find out who sent him." Elena woke up at 4:17 in the morning. The room was dark except for the lamp in the corner, which was turned to its lowest setting. She lay still for several seconds before she moved, which told Adrian, who was sitting in the chair near the window, that she was the kind of person who assessed her situation before she revealed she was conscious. He noticed things like that. "You're safe," he said. She turned her head toward him. Her eyes were dark and careful, and there was a moment where he saw something go across her face that was faster and more complicated than simple fear. Something calculating. Something that was working very hard not to be seen. "Mr. Moretti?" Her voice came out rough and dry. "There's water on the table beside you." She sat up slowly, with the careful movement of someone managing pain, and reached for the glass. She drank half of it before she set it back down. Then she looked at him again. "How did I found you outside, near the back gate." A pause. "I was trying to reach the gate." "I know, you didn't make it." He watched her face. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" She looked at him for a long moment. He had noticed over 3 years that Elena Voss had the unusual quality of going very still when she was deciding something. Most people moved when they were nervous. Small fidgets, shifts in posture, eyes that couldn't hold still. Elena did the opposite. She became absolutely motionless, as though she were waiting for something to pass. "I slipped in the snow," she said. "On the path. I must have hit my face when I fell." He let the silence sit there between them. "Elena?" "I'm fine, Mr. Moretti. I just need a little rest, and I'll be back to work." Dr. Harlan found older bruising. His voice was not accusatory. It was the kind of flat, even voice he used when he needed something to land precisely. "On your back, on your arms. This has been happening for some time." She looked at her hands where they rested on the blanket. "Those are old," she said. "They're not relevant." "Elena." He leaned forward slightly in the chair. "I need you to understand something. What happens inside this house and outside it to people connected to this house is my business. That is not a preference. It is simply a fact. Someone hurt you on my property. I need to know who, and I need to know why." She looked up at him. For just a second, the careful stillness broke, and he saw something underneath it that he recognized not because he had ever seen it in Elena specifically, but because he had seen it in enough people over enough years to know it by sight. It was the look of someone who was exhausted from carrying something alone. "I can't tell you," she said, and then very quietly, "If I tell you, it becomes worse." "Worse how?" She shook her head. He studied her for another moment. Then he stood, which had the effect of making her flinch very slightly, which told him more than she probably intended. "You're not going back to your regular duties until you can move without pain," he said. "Mrs. Fane will bring you whatever you need. There will be someone outside this door." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "For what it's worth, Thomas Red is not in this house anymore." He heard her breath catch. Just slightly. Just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. He walked out and closed the door behind him. Thomas Red, it turned out, had made 3 phone calls after leaving the estate on the night of the storm. The first was to a number registered to a freight company in Albany that had no actual freight operations and had not filed a tax return in 4 years. The second was to a prepaid cell phone that had been activated 2 weeks earlier and had only ever received calls from Thomas Red's number. The third was to a man named Franklin Cross. Dominic laid the information out on Adrian's desk at 7 in the morning while the storm was finally beginning to ease outside and the first gray light was coming through the tall windows of the study. "Franklin Cross," Adrian said. Not a question. A confirmation of something he'd been forming in the back of his mind since 4 in the morning. Business associate of Victor Calder's, Dominic said. Runs acquisitions for Calder's legitimate holding company. On paper. In practice, he's the intermediary. He handles the communication that Calder doesn't want tied to himself. Victor Calder. Adrian sat back in his chair. Victor Calder was 64 years old, had a net worth that several financial publications had placed somewhere between $800 million and $1.2 billion, depending on the quarter-owned property in 6 states, and had been photographed with 2 sitting governors and a former vice president. He ran a foundation that funded children's hospitals. He was on the boards of 3 universities, and for the past 20 years behind all of it, he had run a financial apparatus that laundered money for half a dozen criminal organizations, managed the offshore accounts of elected officials who needed their crimes to stay invisible, and destroyed anyone who got close enough to threaten any of it. Adrian knew Victor Calder. Not personally, but thoroughly. "Why does Victor Calder have a man inside my house?" he said. "That's the question." Dominic opened the folder he was holding and took out a single photograph. "We pulled this from the agency files when we did the original background check on Red. It was clean at the time, but I ran it again this morning with a different set of eyes." He placed the photograph on the desk. That agency, the staffing agency that provided Red, was incorporated 3 years ago. Its registered agent is a holding company in Delaware. That holding company is 3 steps removed from a firm that Victor Calder's people use as a buffer. 3 years ago. Adrian looked at the photograph of Thomas Red. "He was placed here," Adrian said. "Yes." "He was placed here 3 years ago." "Yes." Which meant, and this was the part that required very careful thought, that Victor Calder had arranged for a man to be placed inside Adrian's household 3 years ago. For 3 years, Thomas Red had functioned as an ordinary member of the staff, had done his job well enough not to draw attention, and had waited. For 3 years, he had been watching and waiting for something specific. And last night, he had found it. He had found Elena. "Pull everything on Elena Voss," Adrian said. "Everything. I want to know who she is before she came here." The file on Elena Voss arrived in pieces over the course of the morning. The identity she had used to apply for the position at the Moretti estate 3 years ago was real, in the way that certain carefully constructed identities are real. It had a social security number, a work history, 2 references from previous domestic positions, and a background that checked out at every standard level of verification. But it had been built. Adrian's people could see the construction underneath it when they looked closely enough. The woman under the identity was named Elena Vasquez. She was 34 years old. Her father, a man named Robert Vasquez, had worked as a senior accountant for a financial management firm in Connecticut. A firm that 11 years ago had been quietly acquired by a holding company connected to Victor Calder's network. Robert Vasquez had worked inside that system for 4 years before he began to understand what he was actually part of. And once he understood it, he had spent the following 2 years doing something that most people in that situation did not have the nerve or the foolishness to do. He had kept records, detailed records, the kind of records that named names, attached figures to specific transactions, and created a paper trail that would be devastating in the right hands. Robert Vasquez had disappeared 8 years ago. His body was never found. His daughter, then 26, then going by Elena, then in the middle of a graduate program she would never finish, had vanished 3 weeks after her father disappeared. And she had been running ever since. Dominic read the summary out loud. When he finished, the room was quiet. "She's been hiding for 8 years, Adrian said. "Yes." "She chose to hide here." Dominic was careful. "It appears she chose to hide somewhere that had strong security and enough staff that she could be anonymous. Whether she knew specifically, she knew." Adrian said it without hesitation. She knew exactly what kind of house this was. She chose it because she calculated that no one would look for a woman hiding a secret in the home of a man with enough power to be dangerous to approach. He paused. She was right about that. Until Red. Adrian looked at the file. At the photograph of a man named Robert Vasquez, who had tried to do the right thing and had paid for it. At the photograph of Elena at 26, just before she disappeared, smiling in a way that the Elena he knew had never smiled, open and unguarded and young. Calder's been looking for her for 8 years. He finally put someone close enough to find her. The question is what Red told Calder last night, Dominic said. If Calder knows she's here, he knows she's here. Adrian said it flatly. Red wouldn't have touched her last night unless he'd already made his report. He was removing her, Dominic. He had authorization. He hurt her to get her moving, and she ran for the gate instead of going with him. Dominic was quiet for a moment. That means Calder is going to want confirmation. And when he doesn't get it, he'll send someone else. Adrian closed the file. More than one someone. Faster and less patient than Thomas Red. He looked at Dominic. We have a window. I need to know exactly what Robert Vasquez collected before he disappeared, whether Elena Voss. Elena Vasquez has it, or knows where it is, and I need to know all of it before Victor Calder's next move. Dominic picked up the file. She's not going to tell us easily. No. Adrian stood. She's been surviving for 8 years by not telling anyone anything. That's not something a person gives up just because they're safe and warm. He thought about the way she'd gone still in the bed, the way she had looked at him with those careful dark eyes, the way she'd said, I can't tell you. I'm going to have to give her a reason. What kind of reason? Adrian thought of the older bruises on her back. The ones that had been healing and re-healing for months, layered under each other like evidence of a war. The honest kind, he said. The kind where I tell her the truth about what's coming. Chig. He went back to her room at 10:30 in the morning. She was awake. She had eaten the tray Mrs. Fane had brought, was mostly finished, and she was sitting up with the blanket across her lap and her dark hair pulled back, and she looked, he thought, like someone who had spent the hours since they last spoke, making decisions. He sat in the chair again. The storm had mostly passed outside, and pale winter light came through the curtains. How much of it do you want me to say out loud? He said. And how much have you already figured out I know? She looked at him steadily. Thomas worked for someone who was looking for me. Yes. He reported to them last night before he... She stopped, pressed her lips together. Before he came to find me. Yes. She looked at her hands. Then they know I'm here. Yes. A long pause. Mr. Moretti, I think you should let me leave. If I'm gone, you're not involved. Whatever they're looking for has nothing to do with Elena. He said it the way he had said it the night before quiet level landing precisely. I am already involved. A man was placed in my household to find you. He hurt you on my property. Victor Calder. Do you know that name? She went very still. Victor Calder is aware that you are in my house, he said. That makes this my business regardless of whether I choose to make it my business. There is no version of this where you leave quietly and everything becomes simple. He let that sit for a moment. I know about your father. I know what he did. I know what he left behind. The stillness broke. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't cry, didn't raise her voice, but something shifted in her face, something deep and structural, like a wall, that had been holding for a very long time, finally developing a crack it couldn't close. You don't know what he left behind, she said. You know that he left something. That's not the same thing. Then tell me. She looked at him for a long moment. My father spent 2 years documenting everything, she said. Every account number, every transaction, every name, not just the people doing the moving, but the people directing it. The politicians, the judges, the executives. Her voice was very steady, which he recognized as a form of courage. He kept it in 2 places. A digital copy that he encrypted and sent to a server that only he knew how to access, and a physical copy, actual documents printed and stored that he hid. Hidden where? He told me on the phone 3 weeks before he disappeared. He said if anything happened to him, I needed to find a way to get it out. He said... She stopped. He said he was sorry for involving me, but that he needed someone to know in case. Where is the physical copy? She was quiet for several seconds. Elena. His voice shifted slightly, not threatening, but direct. I need to understand what you're carrying, not so I can take it from you, so I can protect you while you're in this house, which is where you're staying until this is resolved. She looked at him. Why? It was a simple question, and she asked it simply without theatrics. And he understood that she was asking it honestly, genuinely, trying to understand his motivation with the clear-eyed skepticism of a woman who had survived 8 years by trusting almost no one. He thought about that for a moment. Because my father made a decision once, he said. A long time ago. He chose power over a person who needed his help, and that person paid for it. I've had to live with that. He met her eyes. I'm not interested in making the same choice twice. The room was quiet. She looked at him for a long time. Long enough that he began to think she wouldn't answer. Then she said, a town called Garfield Falls, 3 hours north of here. There's a church there, St. Michael's. My father was raised there. He used to take me every summer when I was small. She paused. In the basement of that church, there's a storage room. Behind the shelving unit on the back wall, there's a loose stone. He put it there 2 weeks before he disappeared. Adrian nodded. I need to ask you something, she said. Ask. Victor Calder has been running this for 20 years. He has lawyers and politicians and... She stopped herself, started again. What can you actually do? He looked at her. I can start, he said, by finding out who inside this house knew Thomas Red was anything other than what he claimed to be. Her eyes sharpened. You think there's someone else? I think Red was inside my house for 3 years without showing a single sign of purpose or intent. That requires a level of patience that most people don't have on their own. It requires confidence, the kind of confidence that comes from knowing you have support. He stood. You've been surviving alone for 8 years. You've been very good at it. But surviving and fighting are different things. She looked up at him. Are you saying you want to fight? She said. I'm saying, he replied, that Victor Calder made the mistake of reaching into my house. He moved toward the door. That's his problem now. By noon, Dominic had identified 4 separate points of communication between Thomas Red and the outside over the previous 18 months. What had initially looked like a single contact turned out to be a layered system. Multiple numbers, multiple drop points, a rotation designed to survive a basic security sweep. It was sophisticated. Too sophisticated for a man who moved supply deliveries. He had help setting this up, Adrian said. Someone with access to our security protocols. Someone who knew how we ran our sweeps and helped him stay inside them. Dominic pulled up a second folder. I cross-referenced. The communication pattern changed 17 months ago. Became more careful, more layered. He hesitated. 17 months ago is when Marco Vitelli joined the household security team. Marco Vitelli. Adrian had hired Marco Vitelli away from another operation 18 months ago. Well recommended, 20 years of experience, handled himself well. Where is Marco right now? Adrian asked. That's what I was going to tell you, Dominic said. He left the estate this morning at 7:45, which is within his normal pattern. He hasn't come back. Adrian looked at the map on the desk. The estate. The town of Garfield Falls, 3 hours north. The city 2 hours south where Gerald Finch had shaken his hand with both of his. Victor Calder knows Elena is here, Adrian said. Marco is reporting to Calder's people right now. They are going to move within 24 hours. What do we do? Adrian looked at the chair where Elena had been sitting on the first night 3 years ago during her initial interview. He had barely looked at her then. She had answered every question Mrs. Fane asked and had been composed and quiet, and he had approved the hire without giving her much thought. 3 years she had been in this house. 3 years she had gotten up every morning and made coffee and folded linens and done her job with the particular discipline of someone who had learned that the best way to survive was to be invisible. She had survived 8 years of being hunted by surviving alone. He wasn't going to let that continue. Get me Franklin Cross's address, he said, and find out who Victor Calder is meeting with in the next 48 hours. He put on his jacket. And tell Mrs. Fane that Elena's room needs a lock that works from the inside. A real one. Today. Dominic made a note. And Thomas Red. Adrian stopped at the door. Thomas Red, he said, is going to have a conversation with me before the end of the day. Make sure he hasn't left the state. He walked out into the hallway. Somewhere in the house, past the kitchen and the wide staircase and the corridors that held 30 years of careful power, Elena Voss, who was actually Elena Vasquez, who had her father's evidence hidden in a church 3 hours north, who had been running for 8 years and had finally run out of space to run, was resting in a room with a lamp turned low and a tray of food that was mostly finished. She had asked him what he could actually do. He was going to show her. Thomas Red was located at a budget motel off Route 9 at 2 in the afternoon. He had not left the state. He had checked in the previous night at 11:30, paid cash, and had ordered delivery food twice. His phone showed no calls since the 3 he had made the night before, which meant he was either waiting for instruction or he had gone dark voluntarily. Adrian's men brought him to a quiet building that Adrian owned on the south side of the city. The building looked like an ordinary office space. It had good insulation. Thomas Red was 38 years old and had spent 14 months working the supply lines of the Moretti estate, and had apparently also spent that time reporting the movements of a woman who had never hurt anyone and had simply been trying to disappear. He sat across from Adrian in a bare room with a metal table and did not look particularly frightened, which was interesting. "You know why you're here," Adrian said. Red said nothing. "I'm not going to ask you about the woman. I'm not going to ask you what you told Victor Calder's people." Adrian folded his hands on the table. "I'm going to ask you one thing. How many people does Calder plan to send, and how soon?" Red said nothing. "Thomas." Adrian's voice was patient. "You were placed in my house by people who told you that I was a danger and that they were something more legitimate. I understand that. I understand the story they told you." He paused. "But I need you to think carefully about where you are right now and consider what the people who placed you are willing to do to keep Elena Vasquez from talking. And then I need you to think about whether you are a person they will protect when this becomes complicated." Something moved behind Red's eyes. "They're sending 4 people," he said. "Tonight." Adrian nodded. "They're going to offer to make a trade," Red said. "Calder wants her alive. He thinks she knows where the documents are. If he can get the documents back and make sure she doesn't talk—" He stopped, looked at the table. "The plan was to get her to go quietly, that she would be scared enough. That's what they told me." "She's not going quietly," Adrian said. A pause. "No," Red said. "I figured that out." Adrian stood. "You're going to stay here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll have a longer conversation about what you're willing to do next." He moved toward the door. "You made a choice when you took this job, and I'm not interested in pretending otherwise. But you also just told me what I needed to know. I remember both of those things." He walked out. In the hallway, Dominic was waiting. 4 people, Adrian said. "Tonight." Dominic was already on the phone. Elena was standing at the window of the guest room when Adrian knocked and entered. She had dressed, which must have required significant effort given the bruised ribs, but she was standing straight and her face was composed. She turned when he came in. "They're coming tonight," she said. It was not a question. "Yes." "How do you know?" "Because I asked the right person." She looked at him. Something moved across her face. Not fear exactly, but the particular alertness of someone recalibrating. "Thomas told you?" "Yes." "They'll know he told you. They'll factor that in." She turned back to the window. "Calder's people are not amateurs, Mr. Moretti. I've been running from them for 8 years. I know how they operate." She paused. "They send 4 people so that even if 1 or 2 are stopped, the rest get through. They count on the assumption that the person they're looking for will panic." "Will you panic?" She turned to look at him. There was a long pause. "No," she said. "I panicked 8 years ago when my father disappeared. I haven't panicked since. I've just been running." Her voice was even, but not cold. "There's a difference." He looked at her, at this woman who had been quiet and invisible and careful for 3 years inside his house, who had been quiet and invisible and careful for 8 years before that, and who was now standing in front of him with 2 bruised ribs and a split lip, and who had just told him she was not afraid. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. She waited. "When this is finished, when Calder's people are handled and the documents are secured and the threat is contained, you won't have to run anymore." He said it the way he said things that were definitive. "That's not an offer, it's a statement. I'm going to make it true." She looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" she said again. The same simple, direct question she had asked before. The one that required an honest answer. "Because somebody should have made it true 8 years ago," he said. "And they didn't." She turned back to the window. Outside, the snow had stopped, and the sky was clearing, and the last light of the short January afternoon was going orange against the white of the grounds. "The church in Garfield Falls," she said quietly. "I haven't been back there since my father disappeared." "I know. I thought about it sometimes, whether the documents were still there, whether they'd found them." She was quiet for a moment. "My father was a very ordinary man in most ways. He liked baseball and old movies, and he made terrible coffee." Her voice was steady. "But he did something that took more courage than most people ever have. He spent 2 years collecting everything he needed, knowing what it could cost him, knowing exactly what it could cost him." A pause. "He did it anyway." Adrian said nothing. Sometimes the right thing was silence. "He would have wanted it to matter," she said. "It will matter." He said it with the certainty of someone who intended to make it true. "But first we get through tonight." She nodded. She turned from the window, and for the first time since he had carried her out of the snow, she looked at him without the careful distance she had maintained, without the maid's composure, without the survivor's guarded eyes, and he saw clearly the person underneath. Exhausted, determined, holding something that had been heavy for a very long time. "Okay," she said. "Just that. Okay." And the night closed in around the Moretti estate, as 4 people in 2 dark vehicles made their way up the mountain roads, and Adrian Moretti stood in the hallway outside her door and began the particular kind of preparation that he was very good at. The kind that ended things. 4 people in 2 dark vehicles. That was what Thomas Red had said, and Thomas Red, whatever else he was, had not lied about that. Adrian knew they were coming before his security team flagged the first vehicle on the perimeter cameras. He knew it the way he knew most things, not through instinct exactly, but through the particular kind of attention that came from spending 20 years in a world where being wrong about what was coming got people killed. He had spent the hours after leaving Elena's room doing 3 things simultaneously, repositioning his security team without explaining why, arranging for someone he trusted to drive north toward Garfield Falls before dawn, and thinking very carefully about Victor Calder. Victor Calder did not send 4 amateurs. Victor Calder sent 4 professionals who were accustomed to walking into complicated situations and walking back out without noise. Men who had done this kind of work enough times that they had developed the specific calm of people who did not expect resistance. Because in their experience, the people they were sent to retrieve did not have Adrian Moretti standing between them and the door. That was going to be an interesting problem for them to solve. Dominic found him in the study at 9:15. "First vehicle on the North Road," Dominic said. "Moving slow, they're not rushing. They think they have all night." Adrian looked at the layout of the estate spread across his desk, not a map exactly, but a working diagram. He had drawn himself years ago when he first moved in, marking every entrance, every sight line, every point where the grounds were exposed and where they were covered. "Where's Elena?" "Still in the guest room. Reyes is outside her door." "Good." He looked at the diagram. "When the first vehicle reaches the east gate, I want Petrov and his team to let it through." Dominic went very still. "Let it through." Partially. Let them get to the service road. Then close the gate behind them. He tapped a point on the diagram. The second vehicle will hold on the outside. They'll wait for signal from the first team. I want the second vehicle contained before that signal ever comes. Dominic studied the diagram for a moment. Then he nodded slowly, with the expression of a man who had followed Adrian into complicated situations often enough to know that the complicated-looking plan was usually the one that worked. You want them separated. I want them to believe they're in control right up until the moment they're not. Adrian folded the diagram. Go. Dominic went. Adrian sat in the study for another moment. He thought about what Red had said. Calder wants her alive. He thinks she knows where the documents are. Wants her alive. Present tense conditional. Which meant that the instruction was currently alive, but instructions like that had a shelf life. The moment Calder determined that Elena either didn't know where the documents were or had already handed them to someone who couldn't be managed, the instruction would change. He thought about that very carefully. Then he got up and walked to Elena's room. He knocked once and opened the door. She was not in bed. She was sitting in the chair where he had sat the night before, dressed upright with her hands folded in her lap and her eyes on the door when it opened. Reyes was standing just inside a young man, quiet, reliable, who Adrian had trusted for 3 years, and who had the good sense to look at his phone and find something to read when his employer entered. They're here, Elena said. The first team is on the service road, Adrian said. The second team is being handled outside the gate. She processed this. How many people do you have? Enough. That's not an answer. He looked at her. Under the lamp's light, the bruise on her cheekbone had gone deeper in color, the particular dark purple of something that had fully bloomed, and her eyes were alert in the way of someone running on adrenaline and will. The bruised ribs were clearly bothering her. She was breathing slightly carefully, but her voice was steady. 14 men on the grounds tonight, he said. 6 inside. This door has Reyes. The perimeter has 8. He paused. And me. You're not exactly a neutral party in this, she said. No. He pulled a second chair from against the wall and sat down. I need to ask you something, and I need a direct answer. She waited. The digital copy, he said. The server your father used to store the encrypted files. Do you have the access information? A beat of silence. He sent it to me, she said. The day before he disappeared. An email with what looked like a string of random text. I memorized it and deleted the email. She paused. I've carried it in my head for 8 years. Have you ever tried to access it? Once. 4 years ago. I found a computer I was certain was clean at a library in a city where I didn't know anyone with a connection I paid cash for. Her voice was steady. The access worked. The files were there. But you didn't take them. I didn't have a way to take them that wouldn't create a trail. She looked at him. And I didn't know who to give them to. The people your father worked for, the people who would normally handle something like this, some of them are on the list. I couldn't take the risk. Adrian absorbed that. Victor Calder has been trying to find you for 8 years, he said. He's been patient, but tonight he moved. That means something changed. He watched her face. What changed? She looked at him for a long moment. 3 weeks ago, she said, a federal investigator made contact through a channel I set up years ago, a channel I had never used and had assumed was dead. She stopped. He said he was building a case. He said he had found enough pieces to know the shape of it, but not enough to move on anyone significant. He said, if there was documentation. Who is the investigator? His name is Alan Price. He works out of the New York field office. Is he clean? I don't know. Her voice was honest. I have no way to know. That's the problem. I have no way to know who is on the list and who isn't. Adrian nodded slowly. A sound from the hallway. Not alarming, just footsteps, quick and purposeful. Dominic appeared in the doorway a second later, and his face had the particular tightness that Adrian recognized as controlled urgency. First team is stopped on the service road, Dominic said. Second vehicle, there were 2 vehicles outside, but there's a third. A third vehicle that came from the south different road. It's sitting on the ridge above the east wall. It wasn't in Red's information. Elena's head turned. They brought more than 4, she said. It came out very quiet. Yes, Dominic said. Adrian looked at Elena. She looked back at him. He didn't know about the third vehicle, she said, and something in her voice had shifted not to fear but to something harder and more precise. Or he was told to tell you 4, so you'd plan for 4. The room went very still. Red, Adrian said. Dominic was already on his phone. The men in the first vehicle on the service road were professional and patient, and they had made the mistake of believing that patience was the same as control. It was not. Adrian's team had allowed them through the east gate and then closed it behind them, which put 4 men in a vehicle on a road that was now blocked at one end by a gate and at the other by 3 of Adrian's people who had come around through the equipment shed. The men in the vehicle understood their situation approximately 90 seconds after it developed, which was fast, but not fast enough. Dominic gave Adrian the update over the earpiece as Adrian moved through the house toward the east wing. First team is contained, Dominic said. Second vehicle on the outside of the gate, Peters has them pinned, no movement. A pause. The third vehicle on the ridge has 2 people in it. One has a rifle. A sniper position. Adrian absorbed that without slowing down. They're not just here to retrieve her, he said into the earpiece. If the retrieval goes wrong, they want to make sure she doesn't walk out. That's my read, Dominic said. Keep the third vehicle occupied. I don't want them moving. He turned into the corridor, leading to the east wing, which had an access point along the outer wall that not everyone knew about. Who knows about the east access? A pause that lasted 1 second too long. Dominic. The access was in the estate layout that went to all senior staff when we did the security update 8 months ago, Dominic said carefully. That includes Marco Vitelli. Marco Vitelli, who had left the estate that morning and not come back. Marco Vitelli, who had been helping Thomas Red stay invisible inside the estate's security systems for 17 months. Is there anyone on the east access right now? Adrian said. Checking. Another pause. Then, Petrov isn't responding. Adrian stopped walking. Petrov was the man assigned to the east access. Move, Adrian said, and he was already moving himself. The east wing was quieter than the rest of the house. It had been partly closed off over the winter. Some of the rooms were used only in warmer months, and the silence had a particular quality to it, thick and expectant. Adrian moved through it quickly, one hand on the wall, his eyes adjusting to the lower light. He heard breathing before he reached the end of the corridor, not Petrov's breathing. Petrov was on the floor at the end of the corridor unconscious, his earpiece pulled out. Not dead, his chest was moving, but down. And the east access door was standing slightly open. Adrian stepped back into a doorway. The person who came through the east access was a woman. That was not what he had been expecting. And the surprise of it was useful information, even as he was processing the fact that she moved like someone who knew how to move. Quiet, low scanning left before right, which was the habit of someone trained in a specific way. She was not looking for Adrian. She was looking for a route to the guest room. She had a floor plan. Adrian stepped out of the doorway. You're going the wrong direction, he said. She spun. She was fast. She had something in her right hand that she brought up immediately, and for a half-second, the two of them held that position, her with her weapon up him, with his hands visible, standing in the low light of the east corridor. The guest room is on the other side of the house, he said, which you would know if the floor plan you're using wasn't 18 months out of date. She didn't lower the weapon. You're Moretti, she said. Yes. This doesn't concern you. Everything in this house concerns me. He tilted his head slightly. You came through the east access, which means someone gave you the code. That code was changed 3 months ago, which means you used the old code, which means your information is not current, which means whoever sent you has been planning this for a while, but hasn't been updating their intelligence. He paused. That's a problem for you, not for me. She was thinking. He could see it. Victor Calder is going to be very unhappy, she said. Victor Calder, Adrian said, is going to have a considerable number of unhappy things to think about in the near future. His feelings about this specific evening will be a minor item on the list. He took a single step forward. Put the weapon down. I have 7 people within 30 seconds of this corridor, and you have 1 exit which is behind me. You can make this complicated, or you can make it simple. She lowered the weapon. Smart, he thought. What's your name? He said. Why do you care? Because people who work for Victor Calder and then find themselves in a position like yours have choices to make, he said. And I'm interested in what choice you make. Names make choices personal. A pause. Carla, she said. Carla Mead. Carla. He stepped aside slightly, not enough to give her a path out, but enough to indicate a direction. Walk with me. By 11 o'clock, the situation outside had resolved in the way that situations resolved when one side had been expecting them and the other side had not. The first team on the service road, facing 3 of Adrian's people with blocked exits in both directions, had surrendered their weapons and were sitting in the equipment shed with 2 guards. The second vehicle outside the gate had attempted to leave when it became clear the operation had gone wrong, and Peter's team had prevented that in a manner that left the vehicle drivable but not going anywhere in the immediate future. The third vehicle on the ridge, the one with the sniper, had been the last to fold, and it had folded when Dominic got on a radio frequency he had reasons to know they were using, and said in a tone of complete boredom that the retrieval was finished and they should stand down, which was a lie so confident that it worked for the 6 minutes needed to get 2 of Adrian's men into a flanking position. Carla Mead sat in the room across from Adrian's study with her weapon on the table in front of her and a cup of coffee she hadn't touched. Dominic came to Adrian in the hallway. 6 people total, Dominic said, plus whoever is feeding them information from the outside. Calder moved more resources than Red knew about. He paused. Or Red knew and told us 4. Red told us 4, Adrian said. It was no longer a question. He's still in the building in the city. He hasn't moved. He didn't need to move. He just needed us to plan for 4. Adrian thought about the conversation in the bare room with the metal table. Red's eyes when he answered. The slight pause before the number. He told us the truth about the method. The trade offer, the instruction to bring her alive. He lied about the number, which means someone told him to lie about the number. He looked at Dominic. Calder's people were counting on us being caught short. We weren't. No. Adrian turned toward the room where Carla Mead was sitting. But it was closer than it should have been. He went into the room. She looked up when he entered. She had the face of someone who had spent time recalculating, and she had reached conclusions that had made her somewhat more cooperative than she had been in the East Corridor. You had a sniper on the ridge, he said. Insurance, she said. Insurance against what? Against the possibility that she talks before Calder gets what he needs. Her voice was flat. If the retrieval couldn't happen, the secondary objective was to make sure she didn't leave this estate alive. The words landed in the room like something physical. Calder gave that instruction personally, Adrian said. It came through Franklin Cross, same as all of them. She looked at her coffee cup. I've been on 3 of these jobs in the past 8 years. Same woman, different cities. We always got close. She always moved before we could finish it. 8 years, Adrian said. Victor Calder has been trying to kill a woman for 8 years because her father kept records. Her father kept records that would put 17 people in federal prison, Carla said, including 3 people who have the power to make federal investigations disappear. She looked at him. You understand what you're in the middle of now? Yes, Adrian said. I understand exactly what I'm in the middle of. He walked out. Yeah, Elena was in the hallway outside the guest room when he reached the top of the stairs. She had not stayed in the room. Of course she hadn't. Reyes was beside her looking at Adrian with the expression of a man who had tried to suggest someone stay somewhere and been overridden. Elena's arms were crossed over her chest carefully because of the ribs, and she was standing with the particular stillness that he had come to recognize as her default when she was deciding something. "It's handled," he said. "How many?" "6. Something moved across her face. Not surprise, exactly. He sent 6. He sent 6 with a sniper for insurance. She was quiet for a moment, then very quietly. "He's never sent 6 before." Adrian looked at her. "How many times has he sent people?" he said. "This is the 4th time." She said it with the tone of someone reporting a fact they had made their peace with a long time ago. "First time was 6 months after my father disappeared. 3 people in the city where I was living. I had already moved by the time they arrived." A pause. "Second time was 2 years later. I was in Ohio. I saw them before they saw me. Third time was 4 years ago in Seattle. That one was the closest." Her voice didn't waver. "This is the 4th. And each time you ran. Each time running was the right decision." She looked at him. "Tonight is different." "Tonight is different," he agreed. She uncrossed her arms. "The woman who came through the East Access, was she one of Calder's regulars?" He thought about that. She said she'd been on 3 of the previous jobs. Why? Because if she's been on this job for 8 years, she knows things. Elena's voice was precise. She knows how Calder organizes this. She knows who else is involved. She knows the infrastructure. She looked at him steadily. "You could use that." He studied her. "You've thought about this." "I've had 8 years to think about it." She held his gaze. "I've been running because I couldn't fight. I couldn't fight because I was alone. I'm not alone right now." She paused. "I don't want to run again." The corridor was quiet around them. He held her gaze for a moment that stretched longer than either of them commented on. "Then we won't run," he said. She nodded once, slow and certain. "I want to talk to the woman," she said. "Elena, I know what Calder's people know, and I know what they don't know. I'll recognize it if she's lying about something important." She met his eyes. "You know I'm right." He considered that. He considered her. He thought about 3 years of her moving quietly through his house, and 8 years of her moving quietly through the world, and the particular kind of knowledge that accumulated in a person who had survived that long by reading situations accurately. "Reyes," he said. "Sir, bring Ms. Mead to the east sitting room." Reyes moved. Adrian looked at Elena. "You're going to tell me if you feel the ribs." "I'm fine." "That's not what I said." She looked at him with the faint expression of a person deciding whether to be annoyed. "I'll tell you," she said. They walked down the corridor together. Carla Mead looked different when Elena walked into the room. It was subtle, a tightening around the eyes, a fractional shift in posture. The look of someone who had been thinking of this as an abstract operation suddenly being confronted with the specific human being at the center of it. Carla had been doing this work for years. She had built the particular compartmentalization of someone who did not think about the people in terms of their personhood, but in terms of their function within the job. Elena walking into the room disrupted that compartmentalization. Adrian watched it happen. "You were in Seattle," Elena said. She stood across the table from Carla and looked at her without hostility, without theater. 4 years ago. Gray jacket. Coffee shop 2 blocks from where I was staying." Carla was very still. "You saw me. I saw you an hour before you found the apartment. That's why I was already gone when you got there." Elena sat down. "How did you find me that time, I need to know? Because I never figured it out." A pause. "Pharmacy records," Carla said. "You used a prescription in your real name, once. It was a small thing." Elena was quiet for a moment. "My father's blood pressure medication. I kept refilling it after he disappeared. I don't know why." She looked at the table. I stopped after Seattle. The room had a very particular texture to it. Not silence exactly, but the kind of stillness that develops when two people are having a conversation that is more complicated than it appears on the surface. "Why are you talking to me?" Carla said. Not accusatory. Genuinely asking. "Because you've been in this operation longer than anyone else," Elena said. "And because I need to know something." She looked up. "The federal investigator who contacted me 3 weeks ago, Alan Price. Is he on the list?" Carla's expression shifted. Just slightly. Just a fraction of a degree. But Elena saw it, and from the way Adrian saw Elena's shoulders drop, almost imperceptibly, Elena had been reading it the same way. "You know the name," Elena said. "I know the name," Carla said carefully. "Is he clean?" Carla looked at the coffee cup she hadn't touched. Then she looked at the table. Then she looked at Elena. "No," she said. "He's not clean." The word landed. Elena didn't move. She had the particular quality of someone receiving bad news they had halfway expected, who had braced for it well enough that the impact didn't show. "He works for Calder," Carla said. "Not directly. There are 2 people between them. But Price flagged you 3 weeks ago. He made contact to flush you out. To see if you'd move, if you'd reach out to anyone, if you'd create a trail." She paused. "You reaching out to Moretti was faster than they expected. They had to accelerate the timeline." Elena was quiet for a long moment. "If I had gone to him," she said. "If I had brought the access information to Alan Price, it would have gone to Calder," Carla said. "And you would have been—" She stopped. "Handled." The word was careful and imprecise, and everyone in the room understood exactly what it meant. Elena nodded. Once. Slowly. Then she looked at Carla directly. "Why are you telling me this?" Carla looked at Adrian, then back at Elena. "Because I've been on this job for 8 years, she said, and somewhere in 8 years of chasing a woman across 6 states for records that implicate 17 people who should be in a federal prison, I started having a problem with what I was doing." Her voice was flat, not dramatic, just honest in the way that people were honest when they had run out of reasons to lie. "The man who recruited me told me you were a criminal, that you were holding documents for leverage, that your father had stolen money." She paused. "But you don't behave like someone holding documents for leverage. You behave like someone who has been running for her life." "Because I have been," Elena said. "I know," Carla said. "I know that now." The room was quiet. Adrian leaned forward. "I need 2 things from you, Carla. I need the names of everyone in Calder's network that you know personally. And I need to know who Alan Price reports to between himself and Calder." Carla was quiet for a moment. "If I give you that," she said, "I'm finished. You understand that. There's no version of this where I give you that and go back to what I was doing." "I know," Adrian said. "What do I get?" "You get out of this cleanly," he said. "Which is more than you'll get if Calder decides that tonight's failure is your problem." He held her gaze. "You've seen how he handles failure." She had. He could see it in her face. "There's a lawyer named Harriet Soames," she said. "She's the intermediary between Price and Calder. She doesn't do criminal work officially. She runs a white-collar firm in Manhattan. She handles the communication channel. Price reports to her. She reports to a man named Dennis Weil, who reports to Calder." She took a breath. "Harriet Soames has a file, a physical file. Not because she's honest, but because she's cautious. She keeps records of everything she touches because she doesn't trust Calder not to throw her under a bus if this falls apart. She keeps that file in her office in a floor safe." Adrian looked at Dominic, who was standing near the door. Dominic was already making notes. "Harriet Soames," Adrian said. "Manhattan." "East 58th, Carla said. "Soames and Webb, 14th floor." Adrian stood. "You're going to stay here tonight. Tomorrow morning someone is going to take your statement, all of it, everything you know." He looked at her. "In exchange for the cooperation, I'll make sure the right people understand that you came forward voluntarily." Carla looked at Elena. Something passed between them. Not warmth exactly, but the particular acknowledgement that passed between people who had been on opposite sides of something long enough that they understood each other. "For what it's worth," Carla said. "I'm glad you didn't run." Elena looked at her steadily. "So am I," she said. By 1 in the morning, the estate had resettled into a kind of heavy quiet. The 6 people who had come for Elena had been distributed, the ones willing to cooperate, isolated from the ones who weren't. The weapons secured, the vehicles removed from the ridge and the service road. Dominic was running communications and would continue running them through the night. Mrs. Fane, who had been woken by the noise and had processed the evening's events with the calm of a woman who had been running a complicated household for too many years to be easily rattled, had made coffee for everyone who wanted it and had not asked a single question that wasn't logistical. Adrian found Elena in the kitchen. She was sitting at the long table with a cup of tea. She wasn't drinking, both hands wrapped around it, looking at nothing in particular. She looked very tired. Not the frightened tired of the night before when he had carried her in from the snow, but the particular bone-deep exhaustion of someone who had spent an enormous amount of controlled energy in a short period and was now allowing themselves to feel the weight of it. He sat across from her. She didn't look up. "Alan Price was my best lead," she said quietly. "The only contact in 8 years who reached out through the channel my father set up." She paused. "I knew it was probably too good. I knew the timing was too close to when Calder's people started becoming more active. I told myself I was wrong to be suspicious." "You weren't wrong to be suspicious," he said. "You were right. I wanted to be wrong." She looked down at the tea. "I wanted there to be someone on the other side who was actually trying to do what my father was trying to do. Someone official. Someone with the power to make it matter." Her voice was even. 8 years is a long time to carry something alone." He said nothing. "My father used to say—" She stopped. Started again. "He used to say that the worst thing about injustice wasn't the injustice. It was the people who saw it and looked away." She looked up. "He didn't look away. It killed him. And I've spent 8 years wondering whether he was right to not look away or whether he should have just walked out and let it go." "What do you think?" he said. She was quiet for a long moment. "I think he was right," she said. "I think he was absolutely right, and it cost him everything, and I think he was still right." She met his eyes. "I just wish he were here to see it matter." The kitchen was quiet. "It's going to matter," Adrian said. He said it the way he said things he intended. Not to comfort her, to state a fact he was going to make true. She looked at him. "You don't know that yet," she said. "No," he said. "But I know what Carla Mead just told us. I know there's a physical file in a floor safe in Manhattan. I know that Robert Vasquez's documents are in a church in Garfield Falls, and I have a man driving north right now." He held her gaze. "And I know that Victor Calder sent 6 people tonight, and none of them are going home." She was quiet for a moment. "What happened to the woman?" she said. "Carla. She's staying here tonight. She's going to give a full statement tomorrow." "She could have lied," Elena said. "About Price, about Soames. She could have given us everything and made it all false." "Yes," he said. "But you don't think she did?" "No," he said. "I don't." She looked at him. "Why not?" "Because she looked at you when she said it," he said. "And she looked like someone who had been carrying something heavy and had finally set it down." He paused. "I recognize that look." Elena was quiet. She looked at her tea. After a long moment, she said, "The access string for the server, for the encrypted files my father left." He waited. "If something happens—" She stopped. "If this goes wrong somewhere and I can't—" She looked at him directly. "I need someone to have it. Someone who won't use it for their own advantage. Someone who will make sure it gets to the right hands." He held her gaze. "Are you trusting me with that?" She was quiet for another moment. The longest moment. "Yes," she said. "I'm trusting you with that." He got up and found a piece of paper and a pen from the drawer by the refrigerator, the drawer where Mrs. Fane kept the practical household items, and he put them on the table in front of her. She picked up the pen. She wrote for about 40 seconds, a string of characters that meant nothing to anyone who didn't know what it was, and everything to anyone who did. She put the pen down. She pushed the paper across the table. He looked at it without touching it for a moment. Then he picked it up and looked at it. He read it once carefully. He folded it. He put it in his inside jacket pocket. "It needs to go to someone in the federal system who isn't on the list," she said. "Someone completely removed from Calder's network. I have someone," he said. "I have someone who has never had any reason to interact with Victor Calder's world and who owes me a debt that they will be very glad to repay in this particular way." She nodded. She looked exhausted. "You should sleep," he said. "I should." She agreed and didn't move. He looked at her. Outside, the last clouds from the storm had finally cleared, and the January sky above the mountain was doing what January skies did when they cleared, going brilliant and cold and completely indifferent, full of stars that had been there long before any of this and would be there long after. "Elena," he said. She looked up. "Your father collected evidence for 2 years," he said. "In secret, knowing what it could cost him, knowing exactly what it cost him. And then he made sure you knew where it was." He paused. "He trusted you with it." She said nothing. "He was right to," he said. Her jaw tightened, very slightly, the particular tightening of someone keeping something in. "Get some sleep," he said. He stood. "Tomorrow we go to Garfield Falls." She looked up at him. "Both of us," she said. "Yes," he said. "Both of us." He walked out of the kitchen. Behind him in the quiet, he heard her exhale long and slow, the kind of breath a person let out when they had been holding something tightly for a very long time, and had finally, in a very small way, begun to let go. He walked down the hallway toward the study where Dominic was waiting with the morning's preparations. The house was quiet around him. Somewhere in Manhattan, a lawyer named Harriet Soames was sleeping without knowing her name had been spoken in this kitchen tonight. In Garfield Falls, a church sat in the winter dark with its basement exactly as Robert Vasquez had left it 8 years ago, and a driver was already on the road north. And Victor Calder, 2 hours south in the city, was about to discover that 6 people had gone to the Moretti estate tonight, and that the silence coming back from that direction was the particular silence of something that had gone very wrong. Adrian sat down at his desk. He opened the contact list he kept in his head, not written anywhere, never written anywhere, and found the name he needed. A federal prosecutor in the Southern District. A man who had made his career carefully and cleanly, and who had 12 years ago needed Adrian Moretti, not to say a specific name, in a specific conversation, and who had been carrying that debt quietly ever since. He picked up the phone. It rang 3 times before a voice answered, rough with sleep and sharp with the instinct of a man who knew that a call at 1 in the morning from Adrian Moretti was not a casual thing. "It's late," the voice said. "I know," Adrian said. "I need to talk to you about a man named Victor Calder." A pause. A long pause. "I'm listening," the voice said. The federal prosecutor's name was Daniel Marsh, and he had been carrying his debt to Adrian Moretti for 12 years, with the particular discomfort of a careful man who had done one careless thing and had never been allowed to forget it. He listened without interrupting. Adrian told him enough, not everything, not yet, but enough. Victor Calder's name, the network, the documents, Elena, 8 years of a woman running alone, 6 people sent to a mountain estate in January who would not be reporting back. He did not mention Harriet Soames yet. He did not mention the access string folded in his jacket pocket. He gave Marsh the shape of the thing without the specific weight of it, because specific weight required trust, and trust with Daniel Marsh was something Adrian was going to build carefully over the next 24 hours. When Adrian finished, Marsh was quiet for a long moment. "Victor Calder," Marsh said again, the way a man said a name when it was both expected and still somehow larger than he had prepared for. You know the name, Adrian said. Everyone in the Southern District knows the name, Marsh said. The question has always been whether we could get close enough to matter. A pause. You're telling me someone close enough is still alive? She is, Adrian said. And she has been for 8 years, which should tell you something about how determined she is. Another pause, longer this time. What do you need from me? Right now, nothing except your word that this conversation happened and that you're available. Adrian looked at the folded piece of paper he had taken back out of his pocket and placed on the desk. Not reading it, just looking at it. In the next 24 to 48 hours, I'm going to need you to move fast when I tell you it's time. How fast? Same day fast. A breath. Adrian, if you're asking me to build a federal case in... I'm not asking you to build a case, Adrian said. I'm asking you to be ready to receive one that's already built. All you have to do is not drop it. The line was quiet. All right, Marsh said. I'm available. Adrian hung up. He sat at the desk for another moment. The study was quiet, and the estate around him had the specific quiet of a place that had expelled something violent and was now settling back into itself like water going calm after something heavy had been thrown into it. Dominic was in the east wing coordinating the cleanup. Mrs. Fain had gone back to bed. Reyes was outside Elena's door. Adrian looked at the piece of paper. He picked it up and read it again. The access string was 43 characters long, a combination of letters, numbers, and symbols that looked random and was anything but. Robert Vasquez had composed it. Robert Vasquez had sent it to his daughter in an email that looked like nothing that she had memorized and carried in her head for 8 years, like a key to a door she couldn't open. He folded it again and put it back in his pocket. He was going to keep it there until he could give it to Marsh directly, not digitally, not through an intermediary. In person, face-to-face, where he could watch Marsh's eyes when he received it. He got up and went to the window. The grounds were white and still, and the sky above them was the particular deep clear of a winter night after a storm. Somewhere out there in the dark on the road north, his driver was covering the distance to Garfield Falls. The man's name was Joseph, and Adrian had trusted him with complicated things before. He would reach the church by 4 in the morning. He would not go inside, that was not his instruction. His instruction was to confirm the church was accessible and had not been disturbed, and to wait for Adrian to arrive. Tomorrow. Today, technically. In a few hours. He went back to the hallway and stopped outside the kitchen. Through the half-open door he could see that Elena was still sitting at the table. The tea had gone cold. She wasn't drinking it. She was looking at her hands where they rested on the surface, and she had the particular stillness of someone whose mind was elsewhere, moving through something complicated, following a thread. He didn't go in. He went to his room, sat in the chair by the window instead of the bed, and stayed awake watching the dark outside until it began very slowly to turn gray. At 6:15 in this morning, Dominic knocked on his door with the overnight summary. The 6 people from Victor Calder's operation were contained. 2 had become significantly more cooperative after several hours and had provided names that overlapped with what Carla Mead had told them, which was a useful form of corroboration. The 4 who weren't cooperating were a different matter, but they were not going anywhere, and their silence was for the moment acceptable. The vehicles had been moved to a location Dominic did not specify in the report, because specificity about certain things was a choice rather than a necessity. Thomas Red had remained in the motel room through the night. At 5:40 in the morning, he had made one phone call to a number that Dominic's people traced to a burner registered 2 weeks ago. The call lasted 11 seconds. Whatever he had said in 11 seconds, it had been enough, because 40 minutes later, the burner went dark. He was checking in, Adrian said. Telling someone the operation failed. That's my read, Dominic said. The question is whether he told them it failed because of our numbers or because we knew they were coming. If he told them we knew, Calder changes his approach. Adrian thought about it. If he told them it was just numbers, Calder sends more people and uses the same approach. Which is worse for us. More people is worse for tonight. Same approach is worse for the long game. He looked at the summary. What about Harriet Soames? Dominic pulled out a separate page. Carla Mead's information checks out at the surface level. Soames and Webb, East 58th 14th floor. The firm is real white-collar practice, been operating for 19 years. Harriet Soames is the founding partner. She's been on the New York Bar Association board twice. Donates to 3 different political action committees. He paused. The kind of resume you build when you want to be bulletproof. Is she in the office today? No court appearances scheduled. She's typically in the office on Thursdays. Today was Thursday. Good, Adrian said. I need 2 people in Manhattan by 9 this morning. Not to go in, just to confirm she's there and what her exit looks like. Dominic noted it. And Joseph. He reached Garfield Falls at 3:50. The church is undisturbed. He's waiting. Dominic paused. Adrian, if Calder's people have surveillance on Garfield Falls, they don't know about Garfield Falls, Adrian said. No one does except Elena and me. And whoever Elena may have told over 8 years. She told no one, Adrian said. She's been carrying this alone for 8 years. She doesn't tell people things. He paused. She told me. Dominic was quiet for a moment. Then, with the particular restraint of a man who had been second in command long enough to know which observations to keep to himself. We leave when? 8 o'clock. Adrian stood. Tell Elena, and make sure Mrs. Fane has something for her to eat first. Elena was already up when Dominic came to her room. She had slept barely. He guessed a few hours and dressed, and was standing at the window when he knocked. She turned when he opened the door, and her face had the sharp alertness of someone who had made decisions in the night and arrived at them clearly. 8 o'clock, Dominic said. Mr. Moretti will drive north with you. She nodded. How are the ribs? She considered the question with the expression of someone deciding whether to be honest. Manageable, she said. That's not a good answer. It's the accurate one. He looked at her for a moment. Mrs. Fane is making breakfast. The real kind, not the tray kind. Something shifted very slightly in her expression. Tell her thank you. Dominic started to turn, then stopped. For what it's worth, he said. I've worked with Adrian Moretti for 16 years. I've seen him make a lot of decisions. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I've never seen him make a decision like the one he made 2 nights ago, when he went out in that storm instead of walking past. Elena looked at him. I just thought you should know that, he said, and walked out. She stood at the window for another moment. Outside the grounds were white and quiet, and the sun was just coming up, and somewhere in the estate below her, the morning was beginning with all its ordinary weight. She went downstairs for breakfast. The drive north took 3 hours and 12 minutes. Adrian drove. He did not use a driver for this, which Elena noticed and did not comment on. The roads were clear, the storm had passed cleanly, and the highway crews had been thorough, and the morning was bright and achingly cold, the kind of cold that was beautiful from inside a warm vehicle and punishing to everything outside it. They did not talk for the first hour, not because the silence was uncomfortable, because it wasn't. Elena sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the landscape moving past, and Adrian drove with the particular focused quiet of someone who was simultaneously present and calculating, and the silence between them had the quality of something that didn't require filling. At the 1 hour mark, Elena said, Carla Mead, what are you going to do with her? That depends on how complete her statement is, he said. If she gives us everything she knows, I can connect her to Daniel Marsh as a cooperating witness. Federal protection in exchange for full cooperation. Will she take it? She's already taken it, essentially. She made her choice last night. He glanced at her. What made you trust her? Elena was quiet for a moment. I've been running from Calder's people for 8 years. I know what they look like when they believe in what they're doing and what they look like when they don't. She looked at the road ahead. Carla Mead hasn't believed in what she was doing for a long time. I could see it. The way she talked about the jobs, 3 jobs, 8 years. Most people who do that kind of work either harden completely or they start to crack. She was cracking. You read people, he said. I had to learn. She paused. When you can't trust systems, and you can't trust institutions, and you can't trust anyone with a title, you learn to read people, individually, case by case. She looked at him sideways. That's how I decided to come to your house, actually. He kept his eyes on the road. Tell me, I had 3 options when I needed to disappear 8 years ago. 3 places I thought could provide enough security to keep me safe for a while without anyone asking too many questions. She paused. I spent 2 weeks researching all 3. The other 2 were other powerful men, one in Chicago, one in D.C. The kind of powerful that comes from legitimate means, clean money, political connections, good lawyers. She paused again. I chose you. Because I'm not legitimate, he said. Because the legitimate men had something to lose if things became complicated, she said. They would have handed me over the moment protecting me became a liability. She looked at him. You've spent your life in complicated situations. You don't hand people over. You didn't know that. I read the record, she said. Every person who ever worked for you and then left your employ for whatever reason, voluntary, involuntary, any reason is still alive. In 20 years, not one person who came out of your organization ever wound up as a liability that was handled quietly. She held his gaze for a moment. That's not an accident, that's a principle. He was quiet. So, yes, she said. I trusted you. Before I ever walked through your door, I trusted you. A pause. I just needed to make sure you'd never need to know I was there. Until I did, he said. Until Thomas read, she said. He drove. She looked back at the road. My father would have liked you, she said. And then after a short pause, as if the sentence had surprised her, that's a strange thing to say. It's not, he said. She didn't respond to that. But the silence that followed was a different texture from the one that had preceded it. Joseph was waiting in the parking area of a gas station 2 blocks from the church. He was a compact man in his late 40s who said very little and observed everything. And when Adrian pulled in, he came to the driver's side window and reported in the clipped way of someone who understood that information should be delivered efficiently. Church is open, he said. Unlocked main entrance. There's a woman in the office, looks like administrative staff. No other vehicles in the lot. No surveillance that I can identify exterior or interior. He paused. No sign of anyone watching the perimeter. How long have you been here? Adrian said. Since 3:50. Nothing unusual in that time. Town is quiet. This is not the kind of place where things happen. Joseph glanced at Elena. The side entrance to the basement is around the back. There's a stairwell that goes straight down. If the storage room is as described, it won't be visible from the main office. Good, Adrian said. Stay here. Joseph stepped back. Adrian looked at Elena. She was looking at the direction of the church through the windshield with the expression of someone who had carried a destination in their mind for a long time, and was now facing the moment of actually arriving. You don't have to go in, he said. I have to go in, she said. Elena, I have to go in, she said again with the quiet finality of someone who had already decided. He put it there because he thought I would be the one to come get it. Because he wanted me to be the one. She looked at Adrian. I'm not letting someone else go in for me. He looked at her. The ribs, he said. Are manageable, she said, and opened the door. They walked to St. Michael's together. The church was small and old and had the particular smell of churches that had been in the same place for over 100 years, wood and candle wax, and something that was either old stone or old time. It was hard to say which. The administrative woman in the office glanced up when they passed the open door, and Adrian paused and told her in a pleasant voice that they were visiting on behalf of a family with history in the parish. And the woman smiled, the way church staff smiled at that kind of statement, and went back to her work. The door to the basement stairwell was at the back of the main hall, past the pews on the left side. It was unlocked. The stairwell was narrow and dark, and Elena went down it without hesitating, one hand on the rail, and Adrian followed. The storage room was exactly where she had said it would be. Behind the shelving unit, on the back wall, shelves full of folded linens, old hymnals, candles in various stages of use. There was a gap just wide enough to get behind it. Elena moved the shelving unit with Adrian's help slowly, because of the ribs, because it was heavier than it looked, because 8 years had allowed things to settle. The wall behind it was plain stone. Elena crouched down. Her hands moved over the stones with a certainty that told him she had memorized this too, the same way she had memorized the access string, the way she had been memorizing things for 8 years, because her memory was the only storage she could trust. Third stone, from the left second row, from the floor. She pressed her fingertips into the mortar and pulled. The stone moved. It came out with the particular heaviness of something that had been sitting in one place for a long time. Behind it was a hollow space, roughly the size of a shoebox. And inside the hollow space, wrapped in 2 layers of plastic, and then in what had once been a cloth dish towel, was a bundle of documents. Elena took it out. She held it in both hands. She didn't open it. She just held it. Adrian watched her face. He watched the very particular thing that happened in it. Not relief exactly, but the landing of something that had been suspended for 8 years. The moment when a thing that had existed only as a weight suddenly became real and physical and present. "He put it in the same stone he showed me when I was 7 years old," she said. Her voice was very quiet. "We found it when we were exploring the basement during a summer visit. He said, if you ever need to keep something very safe, Elena put it somewhere that only you and I know." She looked at the bundle. He remembered. Adrian said nothing. She pressed the bundle briefly against her chest. Then she stood carefully and turned to him. "Let's go," she said. They were halfway back to the vehicle when Adrian's phone rang. It was Dominic. He answered it. "We have a problem," Dominic said. Not urgently. Dominic did not do urgency. He did precision, but with a weight that told Adrian the problem was significant. "Thomas Red left the motel 30 minutes ago. Our people followed. He went to a diner 4 blocks away and met with someone." "Who?" "The someone we don't know. Male 50s came in a vehicle registered to a rental company in Albany. The meeting was short, less than 10 minutes. Then Red went back to the motel, and the other man drove north." North. Adrian stopped walking. Elena stopped beside him. "He drove north," Adrian said. "He's on Route 9 heading toward Garfield Falls," Dominic said. "We're tracking the vehicle, but it's 60 miles south of your location and moving at highway speed." Adrian looked at Elena. She had heard enough. Her face had gone very still. "How long?" Adrian said. 50 minutes, maybe less." "We're leaving now," Adrian said. "Keep me on the line." They moved fast. Adrian's hand was at Elena's back, not guiding. She was moving on her own quickly, with the particular economy of someone who had packed up and evacuated before, and knew how to do it without waste. They reached the vehicle in less than 2 minutes. Joseph saw them coming and was already standing. "Drive," Adrian said. Joseph got in. "Different route back," Adrian said. "Not Route 9. Take me the back roads." Joseph already had his phone out, pulling up an alternative route. Elena was in the back beside Adrian. She had the bundle of documents on her lap, both hands flat on top of it, and she was looking at the back of the seat in front of her, with the focused inward expression of someone running calculations. "He told them," she said. "Yes. He told them about Garfield Falls. Someone told Red about the documents, and Red told Calder's people." She looked at Adrian. "How would Red know about Garfield Falls?" "He wouldn't," Adrian said. "Unless someone else in the house knew." She was quiet for a moment, processing. "Marco Vitelli," Possibly. But Vitelli didn't know about Garfield Falls either. I told no one except you. He thought about it. The only person who could have... He stopped. She looked at him. Carla Mead, he said. The name landed in the vehicle like something physical. Elena shook her head immediately. No, she didn't know about Garfield Falls. I didn't tell her. She told us about Soames and Price. She gave us exactly enough to be credible, Adrian said carefully. And then this morning, someone drove north. It's not her, Elena said. You're sure? I'm sure. Her voice was quiet but absolute. I know the difference between someone who's cracking and someone who's performing. She was cracking. It was real. He believed her. He also couldn't afford to assume. Dominic, he said into the phone. Carla Mead. Is she still in the East Wing? A pause. Checking. A longer pause. She's there. She's been there since last night. No communication we've detected. Keep watching her. Don't move her. He lowered the phone slightly. Then how did they know about Garfield Falls? Elena was quiet for a moment. Then, they didn't, she said. They didn't know about Garfield Falls specifically. Think about it. If they'd known, they would have sent someone here days ago. They sent someone now within hours of the failed retrieval. She looked at him. They're following us. They put a tracker on one of the vehicles, or they flagged your plates, or they have someone watching the estate's exits. They don't know where we're going. They're following to find out. Adrian turned to Joseph. Stop the car! Joseph pulled over. Get out and check under both rear panels and the undercarriage. Joseph was out in 20 seconds. He took 40 more seconds crouched beside the vehicle. Then he came back. He held up a small device between two fingers. Magnetic. Small. The kind that fit in the palm of your hand and cost $300 and could be bought without paperwork if you knew where to look. Elena looked at it. How long has it been on there? She said. No way to know, Joseph said. Could be last night during the operation. Could be before. Before, Adrian said. Before last night. He thought about Marco Vitelli, who had left the estate 17 months after helping Thomas Red stay invisible in the security systems. Marco put it on, before he left yesterday morning. Joseph looked at him. What do you want me to do with it? Adrian thought for exactly 3 seconds. Put it on the next southbound truck you see, he said. Joseph smiled very slightly, the expression of a man who appreciated a practical solution. He got out, walked to the edge of the road, and waited 30 seconds until a delivery truck heading south appeared and placed the tracker on its rear bumper with 2 fingers while appearing to tie his shoe. He got back in. Let's see how long it takes them to follow a delivery truck to Albany, he said. Elena let out a breath. They'll realize within the hour. Within the hour, we'll be an hour ahead of them, Adrian said, and we'll be going a different direction. Back at the estate by 1 in the afternoon. Elena put the bundle of documents on Adrian's desk. Neither of them had opened it yet. There was something about the moment that required preparation, not ceremony exactly, but intention. Dominic was there. So was a woman named Sandra Park, who was 37 years old and had a law degree. She never practiced, and instead used as a framework for understanding everything Adrian brought to her when he needed things understood, precisely and legally. She had worked with Adrian for 6 years, and she was the right person for this. Elena unwrapped the plastic, then the dish towel. The documents were intact. 8 years in a church basement behind a stone wall had preserved them almost perfectly. There was some brittleness at the edges of a few pages, a very faint smell of age, but the text was clear. The ink had not run. Sandra put on gloves before she touched anything. She began going through the pages with the careful, systematic focus of someone who was reading the structural logic of something, rather than just its content. After 15 minutes, she sat back. He organized it chronologically, she said. First entry is from 11 years ago. Last entry, she checked, 6 weeks before he disappeared. She looked up. He knew they were getting close. What's the scope? Adrian said. I need more time to be thorough, Sandra said. But at a first-pass transaction records account numbers names attached to specific transfers, cross-referenced with dates of known political events, vote records, policy changes, contract awards. She paused. He wasn't just keeping financial records. He was connecting the money to the outcomes it bought. The room was quiet. Names, Adrian said. Sandra looked at the pages. I see Calder's name directly on 14 separate entries. The rest are through proxies, but he's documented the proxy chains. She looked up. I see Franklin Cross, Dennis Weil. A pause. I see Harriet Soames. Elena was watching Sandra's face with the focus of someone reading a verdict. And Alan Price, Sandra said. He's there, Elena said. It wasn't a question. He's there, Sandra confirmed. 3 entries, 2 of them specific enough to be actionable. Elena looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked up. How many people total? Sandra counted carefully. 19 names in direct entries. Another 11 in documented proxy chains. 30 names. Elena closed her eyes for just a second, then opened them. My father counted 17, she said. He was still finding them when he ran out of time. He missed some, Sandra said, but what he found is enough. She looked at Adrian. This is enough to open federal investigations on at least a dozen of these names immediately and build airtight cases on 6 of them. Adrian looked at Elena. She was looking at the pages. At her father's handwriting, a neat, careful hand that moved across the pages in precise columns, the handwriting of a man who was thorough by nature and had applied that thoroughness to the most important thing he had ever done. He did everything right, she said quietly. Everything exactly right. Yes, Sandra said. He did. Elena pressed her lips together and nodded once and said nothing else for a moment. Then she looked at Adrian. We need to move on Soames before Calder knows we have the documents. I know, he said. If Calder figures out we were in Garfield Falls, he already suspects. The tracker told him something, but they don't know what we found and they don't know who we're talking to. He turned to Sandra. I need a complete index. Names corresponding document entries enough for a federal prosecutor to know exactly what he has before he opens the first page. How fast? Tonight. Sandra picked up the first page. I'll need coffee. Mrs. Fain, Adrian said to the room at large, and Mrs. Fain, who was standing in the doorway, in the way that she had been standing in doorways, anticipating needs for 30 years, said, already making it, and disappeared. It was at 4 in the afternoon that the second twist arrived, and it arrived in the form of Dominic opening the study door with a face that was very carefully composed. Franklin Cross is dead, he said. The room stopped. When? Adrian said. This morning, found in his apartment in the city at noon. Preliminary reading is cardiac event, but the circumstances... He paused. He was found with his computer open and a significant number of files deleted from it in the previous 12 hours. Calder is cleaning house, Elena said. Everyone in the room already knew it, but she said it clearly and without dramatization, and the clarity of it made it land harder. Cross was the intermediary between Calder and Price, between Calder and Soames, between Calder and his entire operation, Dominic said. If Calder is removing Cross, he's preparing to detach, Adrian said, to cut everything that connects him to the operation before it collapses. He looked at Elena. He doesn't know we have the documents yet. He doesn't know about Marsh, but he knows last night failed, and he knows something has changed. He's going to go after Soames next, Elena said. The file in her office. Yes, Adrian said. If he gets to Soames before we do. He won't. Adrian looked at Dominic. I need 2 people at Soames and Webb in the next 2 hours, not inside, outside. If Soames moves, I want to know before her elevator hits the lobby. Dominic was already on the phone. "And call Marsh," Adrian said. "Tell him I need a meeting tonight. In person. Tell him it's time." Dominic came back 20 minutes later with his face carrying the particular weight of someone delivering the second half of bad news. "Price is gone," he said. Adrian looked at him. "Alan Price. He didn't come into the federal office this morning. His supervisor, the one clean enough to answer the phone, says he called in sick yesterday afternoon. His apartment is empty. Neighbors say they saw him loading bags into a car yesterday evening." The room was very still. Elena stood up. "He ran," she said. "Someone warned him," Dominic said. "Someone in Calder's network told Price that his name had been spoken." "Who?" Elena said. "Who could have told him Carla Mead?" "Carla Mead has been in the East Wing since last night," Dominic said. "Then who?" She stopped. The silence stretched for exactly 3 seconds before Adrian said the name that had been forming in his mind since Dominic finished speaking. "Thomas Red," he said. "This morning, the 11-second call. He wasn't just reporting that the operation failed. He was passing a name. He was telling someone that Price's name had come up." "But how did Red know about Price?" Dominic said. "He didn't need to know who Price was," Adrian said. "He just needed to know that we were asking about federal contacts, and whoever he called in those 11 seconds knew exactly who that meant." Elena sat back down. She put both hands flat on the desk on either side of her father's documents and looked at them for a moment. "If Price runs," she said, "Calder loses a direct line into the federal system. That's good for us. It means one less person who can warn him about Marsh." She looked at Adrian. "But it also means Calder knows we have a name. He knows we talked to someone who gave us a federal connection. Which means he knows the operation has moved past retrieval," Adrian said. "What does he do when he knows that?" she said. He looked at her directly. He stops trying to recover the documents and starts trying to eliminate the witnesses. The word witnesses landed in the room with the weight of exactly what it meant. Elena held his gaze. "Then we need to be faster than he is," she said. "Yes," he said. She looked at the documents. At her father's handwriting, careful and precise across 30 pages of evidence that had waited 8 years for this exact moment. "Tonight," she said. "We move tonight." "Tonight," he agreed. He picked up his phone and called Daniel Marsh. The call connected on the second ring. "I need you in person," Adrian said. "Tonight. I'm bringing everything." A pause. "Where?" Marsh said. "I'll send you an address at 7 o'clock." Adrian looked at the window. Outside, the January afternoon was already going dark, the short winter day folding itself closed at 4:30. "Bring someone you trust, just one person, and Daniel." He paused. "Don't tell anyone else you're coming." "You think my office is compromised?" Alan Price ran this afternoon. The silence on the other end of the line was the silence of a federal prosecutor understanding exactly what had just been handed to him and feeling the full weight of it. "I'll be there," Marsh said. Adrian ended the call. He looked at Elena, who was still sitting with her hands on her father's documents. Her face composed and her eyes sharp, every part of her gathered into the particular focus of someone who had been moving toward this moment for 8 years and had finally gotten close enough to see it clearly. "Sandra," he said. Sandra looked up from the pages. "How much longer do you need?" She checked her watch. 2 hours for the complete index." "You have 90 minutes, he said. She looked at the pages and then looked back at him and said with the expression of a woman who had done impossible things on tight timelines before, "Then I'd better stop talking." She went back to work. Adrian stood at the desk and looked at the documents and thought about Victor Calder, 64 years old, a net worth north of $1 billion, photographed with governors and a former vice president. A foundation that funded children's hospitals, 3 universities with his name on a building apiece. And tonight, For the first time in 20 years, Victor Calder was about to find out that the thing he had been trying to bury had hands. And one of those hands was Adrian Moretti's. He turned to Dominic. "Where is Harriet Soames right now?" Dominic checked his phone. "Still in the office. Car in the parking structure. No movement." "Good," Adrian said. "The moment she moves, I want to know." He looked at the door. "And get me Thomas Red," he said. "The real conversation. The one we didn't finish yesterday." Dominic nodded once and picked up the phone. Outside the dark was complete now. And somewhere in the city, Victor Calder was making calls of his own. And the night was moving toward a point where all the threads that had been running in parallel for 8 years were going to converge in one place, and someone was going to lose everything before morning. Adrian intended to make sure it wasn't Elena. Thomas Red sat in the bare room with the metal table for the second time in 2 days, and he looked different from the first time. The first time he had been contained. Careful. The particular stillness of a man who had decided in advance how much he was going to give and was managing the transaction. He had told Adrian 4 people, and it had been a partial truth wrapped around a useful lie, and he had done it with the professional calm of someone who had calculated that partial cooperation was the safest position. That calculation had changed. Adrian could see it in the way Red was sitting, not relaxed, not performing calm, but genuinely unsettled, in a way he hadn't been 48 hours ago. The 11-second call this morning had not been a clean handoff. Something in it had come back to him. Adrian sat down across from him. He put nothing on the table. No folder, no notes, no props. He just sat and looked at Thomas Red with the particular patience of a man who had all the time he needed and knew it. "Franklin Cross is dead," Adrian said. Red's jaw tightened, very slightly, but it moved. "I know you heard me this morning," Adrian said. 11 seconds. You gave someone a name or a number, and someone used it to warn Alan Price, and Price ran this afternoon." He paused. "And now Franklin Cross is dead, which means the person you called this morning decided that Franklin Cross was a liability." Red looked at the table. "You've been working for Calder for how long?" Adrian said. A pause. 6 years. 6 years. And in 6 years, how many times have you seen Victor Calder decide that a person who knew too much had become a liability? Red said nothing. "Franklin Cross knew too much," Adrian said. "He was the intermediary. He handled every communication. He knew every name, and this morning, within hours of last night's failure, Victor Calder decided that Franklin Cross was more dangerous alive than dead." He leaned forward slightly. "You reported to Franklin Cross Thomas. For 6 years, everything you gave Calder went through Cross, which means Cross has 6 years of your information." Red looked up. "Which means?" Adrian continued. "That when Victor Calder decided to clean his network, your name is on the same list as Franklin Cross's." The silence in the room was absolute. Red's throat moved. "The 11-second call," he said. His voice was quieter than it had been. "I called a number Cross gave me. A direct emergency line. If the operation failed and I couldn't reach Cross." "That number doesn't go to Cross anymore," Adrian said. "Does it?" Red closed his eyes for 1 second, then opened them. "No," he said. "Who does it go to?" "I don't know. Cross gave it to me 2 months ago. He said to use it only if everything fell apart." A pause. "He said it was a failsafe." "It was a failsafe for Calder," Adrian said. "Not for you." The room held that truth for a moment. "Thomas." Adrian's voice shifted, not softer exactly, but more direct. The particular directness of getting to the point. "I'm going to ask you one more time, and I need everything. Not 4 people, not the partial truth, everything." He held Red's gaze. "How deep does your knowledge of Calder's operation go?" Red looked at him for a long time. Then he said, "Deep enough to matter." "Then start talking," Adrian said, "because the window you have right now is closing faster than you think." Red talked for 47 minutes. Not everything a man with 6 years inside a criminal network didn't give everything in 47 minutes, but enough. Enough to fill in the spaces that Carla Mead's statement had left open, enough to confirm the names in Robert Vasquez's documents, enough to add 3 names that Vasquez hadn't found. 3 new names. One of them was a sitting senator. Dominic, who had been standing at the back of the room with his notepad, stepped outside when Red said the senator's name and made a phone call that Adrian could hear through the door, very low, very fast. When Dominic came back in, his face had the expression of someone who had just recalibrated the scope of the thing they were standing in the middle of. Adrian looked at him. Dominic nodded once. Confirmed. The senator's name was in Red's information, and in Vasquez's documents, and in Carla Mead's statement, and all 3 of them had arrived at it independently. That was not coincidence. That was the particular convergence of truth from multiple directions. When Red finished, Adrian stood. "You're going to write all of that down," he said, "word for word, as detailed as you can make it. Sandra Park is going to sit with you while you do it. You're going to sign it." He paused. "And then I'm going to make a call that puts you in contact with a federal prosecutor who is not on the list. That conversation is your best chance at walking away from this with some version of your life intact." Red looked at him. "And if I say no," he said. "Then you stay in this room while Calder works through his list," Adrian said. "And you hope he gets to you after we've already moved, which is a very specific kind of hope that I wouldn't stake my life on." Red looked at the table. "Get me the paper," he said. Tink. Elena was in the study when Adrian returned. She was sitting with Sandra's completed index in front of her, going through it with the same systematic focus that Sandra had applied to building it. She had her father's documents beside it, cross-referencing, checking Sandra's summaries against the original text, with the attention of someone who needed to verify everything personally. She looked up when he came in. "Red," she said. He talked. Adrian moved to the desk and stood across from her. "There are 3 more names. One of them is Senator Paul Whitmore." She went very still. Senator Paul Whitmore had been in office for 14 years. He sat on the Senate Finance Committee. He had been the keynote speaker at 2 of Victor Calder's foundation fundraisers in the past 5 years. He was mentioned in profile pieces as a likely future presidential candidate. "My father was looking at him," Elena said. Her voice was quiet. "He had a file started, but he ran out of time before he could complete it." She looked at the index. "He suspected. He just couldn't prove it." "Red proved it," Adrian said. "And Whitmore is in your father's documents as a recipient, even if the chain was longer. Sandra will find it." Elena looked at the pages. "Whitmore being involved changes the federal exposure," she said. It wasn't alarm in her voice, it was calculation. 8 years of thinking about this, understanding its architecture. A sitting senator with Finance Committee access, Calder wasn't just buying policy. He was buying oversight. He had someone inside the regulatory structure. "Which is how he stayed clean for 20 years, Adrian said. "Yes." She looked up. "Does Marsh know about Whitmore?" "Not yet. He needs to know before the meeting. If he walks into this without knowing a sitting senator is in the network, he's going to be blindsided, and I need him clear-headed." She paused. "Whitmore has allies in the Justice Department. If anyone in Justice is going to receive a heads-up that Marsh is moving on Calder—" "I understand," Adrian said. "I'll tell him before he arrives." She nodded. Then she looked back at the documents, and something crossed her face that was quieter and more personal than the strategic calculation of a moment before. "My father had a file started on Whitmore," she said again. "He ran out of time." "He didn't run out of time," Adrian said. "He did everything he could with the time he had, and then he made sure his daughter knew where to find it. He held her gaze. He finished it. Just not the way he planned." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked back at the documents, and her jaw set in the way it did when she was done being moved by something and was ready to work again. "What's the timeline for tonight?" she said. Maid. At 7 o'clock, Adrian sent Daniel Marsh an address. Not the estate, a building in the city that Adrian used for meetings that required a certain kind of privacy, not connected to any of his registered business interests, accessed through a parking structure with an interior that looked like a law office, because he had furnished it like one specifically for occasions like this. At 7:15, he called Marsh directly. "Before you arrive," he said, "Senator Paul Whitmore." The silence on Marsh's end lasted 4 full seconds, which was the longest silence Adrian had ever heard from a man who prided himself on his composure. "Say that again," Marsh said. "Senator Paul Whitmore is documented as a recipient in the network. 3 independent sources all arrived at his name without knowledge of the others. One of them is a sitting senator with Finance Committee access, who has been providing regulatory cover for Victor Calder's operation for at least 9 years. Another silence, shorter this time. "Who else is in the room tonight?" Marsh said. "Elena Vasquez, whose father built the original documentary case, Sandra Park, who has indexed the documents, and Dominic Reyes, who is mine." He paused. "You said bring one person. Bring someone who has never been in the same room as Whitmore." "My senior investigator, Claire Hoban," Marsh said. "She's been on financial crimes for 11 years. She's never met Whitmore." "Then bring her." He ended the call. Elena was watching him from across the room. "He's shaken," she said. "Yes." "Good," she said. "He should be." She paused. "Shaken people pay attention." They reached the meeting location at 8:30. Daniel Marsh and Claire Hoban were already there when Adrian and Elena arrived, which told Adrian that Marsh had left early, the act of a man who needed to move because standing still felt dangerous. Marsh was 56, compact gray at the temples, with the careful face of someone who spent his professional life reading other people's faces and had consequently learned to keep his own very controlled. He stood when they came in, and his eyes went to Elena immediately, and something moved in his expression that was not quite what Adrian had expected. It was recognition. Not personal recognition, they had never met, but the recognition of someone who had been building a case from incomplete pieces for years and was now seeing the piece that would make it whole. "Elena Vasquez," he said. "Yes," she said. "Your father was Robert Vasquez. He worked for Meridian Financial Services." "Yes. We knew about Meridian 9 years ago," Marsh said. "We opened an inquiry. It was shut down in 6 weeks by a motion that came from 3 levels above my supervisor." He paused. "I always believed it was shut down because someone didn't want it to proceed. I never had enough to prove it." "Senator Whitmore sits on the Finance Committee," Elena said. "He has oversight authority over the division that would have handled that inquiry. A word from his office routed through the right deputy, and it disappears from the docket without leaving a record of why." Marsh looked at her with the expression of someone filling in a gap that had been open for 9 years. "Yes," he said. "That's exactly how it would work." Claire Hoban, who had been standing beside Marsh with a laptop bag over her shoulder and the focused attention of someone who had been briefed on the drive over and was running very fast, said, "What do you have?" Elena looked at Sandra, who put the index on the table. Then Elena put the documents beside it. "My father spent 2 years collecting this," Elena said. "Everything is cross-referenced. Names, account numbers, dates, corresponding outcomes. Sandra Park has indexed it for rapid access." She looked at Hoban directly. "It's complete from 11 years ago through 6 weeks before he disappeared. Everything after that is covered by 3 independent witness statements, Carla Maid, Thomas Red, and Adrian's own intelligence. They corroborate everything in the documents and extend it forward." Hoban pulled on gloves and opened the index. She read for 3 minutes without speaking. Then she looked up. "This is enough," she said. It came out very quietly, the voice of a professional who had spent 11 years looking for something and was now holding it. "For Calder," Marsh said. "For Calder. For Soames. For Price, if we can find him. For Whitmore." She looked at the pages. "For all of them." The room was very quiet. Marsh looked at Elena. "How long have you been carrying this?" 8 years, she said. He was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said. "That inquiry we closed if we had fought harder to keep it open. You didn't know, she said. It was not absolution exactly, but it was honest. None of the people who could have stopped this knew everything they needed to know. She held his gaze. Now you do. Marsh picked up his phone. I'm calling the director of the field office, he said. Tonight. And I'm calling the deputy attorney general directly, not through channels directly. Whitmore's influence doesn't reach the Daig's personal line at 9 o'clock on a Thursday night. Wait, Adrian said. Marsh looked at him. Harriet Soames, Adrian said. She has a physical file in a floor safe in her office, a personal record of every communication she handled between Calder and his network. She kept it as insurance. He paused. That file does not exist after tonight if Calder reaches her first. Then we move on Soames tonight, Marsh said. You have enough for a warrant. Marsh looked at Hoban. Hoban was already reviewing the index with one hand while pulling her phone out with the other. 60 pages of documented transactions naming Soames directly, Hoban said without looking up. 3 corroborating witness statements. Yes, we have enough for a warrant. Then I need 2 things from you before you make those calls, Adrian said. First, the people in the building in the city. The 6 from last night. They need to be processed tonight, not tomorrow. Done, Marsh said. What's the second? Adrian looked at Elena. She looked back at him. The access string, he said. Robert Vasquez's encrypted digital files. His daughter has been carrying the access information for 8 years. He paused. I want it transferred to you tonight in this room directly. No digital transmission, no intermediary. Marsh looked at Elena. She reached into her pocket and took out a folded piece of paper, not the one she had written in the kitchen, which Adrian still had in his jacket, but a second copy she had written out this afternoon, the same 43 characters in her father's careful daughter's careful hand. She held it for a moment. Just one moment. Then she put it on the table. Marsh picked it up. He read it. He did not hand it to Hoban. He folded it and placed it in his inside jacket pocket with the particular deliberateness of someone treating something like what it was the most important document in the room. Mrs. Vasquez, he said, and then stopped. Started again. I'm going to make this matter. Elena looked at him. I know, she said, because I'm not going anywhere until it does. The call to the Deputy Attorney General took 4 minutes to connect and 7 minutes to complete. And when Marsh came back into the room, his face had the specific stillness of someone who had just moved something very large and was feeling the momentum of it. We have authorization to move on Soames tonight, he said. Warrant is being processed now, 2 hours maximum. He looked at Adrian. The field office is sending a team to your building to process the 6 from last night. My people will cooperate fully, Adrian said. There's something else. Marsh's voice shifted slightly. The DIAG is aware of Whitmore. Not from me, she already knew. She's been building a parallel investigation for 7 months that she's kept completely off-channel because of exactly the kind of oversight interference we're talking about. He paused. Your documents are the piece she's been missing. Elena went very still. She's been investigating him for 7 months, she said. Yes. Parallel, off-channel. She processed that, which means Whitmore doesn't know. No, Marsh said. He doesn't know, because the DAG is careful in a way that doesn't make the news. He looked at Elena. She wants to talk to you directly, tomorrow morning, in her office. Elena was quiet for a moment. 8 years. She had spent 8 years unable to trust anyone with authority because authority could be bought. She had watched her father get killed because he had done the right thing, and the people who were supposed to protect people who did the right thing had been bought along with everything else. She had carried a key to evidence in her head because there was nowhere safe to put it down, and now a federal prosecutor was telling her that the Deputy Attorney General of the United States had been building toward the same truth for 7 months alone and off-channel because she, too, had understood that the official channels weren't safe. All right, Elena said. All right, Marsh said. I'll be there tomorrow morning. She looked at him steadily. And Mr. Marsh, if this stops halfway because someone with enough title decides it's inconvenient, I want you to know that I have copies of everything in locations that have nothing to do with this room or this building or anyone in it. Marsh looked at her. I understand. I need you to understand it the way my father understood it, she said. Not as a warning, as a fact. She paused. He trusted the right people with the right information at the right moment. And it still wasn't enough. I'm not making the same mistake. Marsh held her gaze. No, he said quietly. Neither am I. At 10:47 that night, federal agents entered Soames & Webb on the 14th floor of a building on East 58th Street. Harriet Soames was still in the office. This was not because she was working late by choice. Adrian's people watching the building since that morning had been tracking a pattern of calls to Soames's cell phone throughout the day. Calls that Calder's people had been making since morning, increasingly urgent, which had the effect of making a careful woman who had survived 19 years in a dangerous world by never running until she was certain she needed to decide whether tonight was the night. She had not decided in time. The agents found her at her desk, with two phones in front of her, one of which was a burner she had not used yet. The floor safe was behind the credenza, and it was locked, and when the agents produced the warrant and a locksmith, it opened. The file inside was, as Carla Mead had said, thorough. Harriet Soames had kept 19 years of records. Not because she was honest, she was demonstrably not honest, but because she was careful in the specific way that people who did dangerous things with powerful people were careful. She had kept records as insurance and as leverage, and as the particular kind of protection that came from making sure that if she went down, she did not go down alone. She looked at the file as the agents removed it, and she said very quietly to no one in particular, I should have burned it 2 years ago. The agent processing the scene noted this in his report. Adrian received the update from Dominic at 11:15. He was in the study at the estate, and Elena was across the desk from him, and when he relayed the information, her expression did not change immediately. There was a half-second delay, the way there was always a delay between receiving news and feeling it. And then something shifted in her face that was slow and complicated, and not quite relief. Soames is in custody, he said. She nodded. The file was in the safe. She nodded again. Elena. She looked up. It's moving, he said. Everything that was supposed to be buried is moving. She was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. I can feel it. A pause. That's the thing about carrying something for a long time. When you start to put it down, you feel the weight more, not less. Because you finally understand how heavy it was. He looked at her. She looked at the desk between them, at the empty space where her father's documents had been before Sandra took them to photograph and catalog for the federal case. He worked in an office, she said. A regular office in a regular building with a commute and a lunch hour and a coffee mug that said world's okayest accountant that I gave him as a joke. She smiled at that very briefly, and the smile was a complicated thing. He was an ordinary man who found himself looking at something that wasn't ordinary and decided he couldn't look away. She paused. He didn't have a powerful boss to protect him. He didn't have connections or money or a security team. He just had his own sense of what was right and what wasn't. And a daughter who didn't give up, Adrian said. She looked at him. I almost gave up, she said. Twice. After Seattle, and then again about 2 years ago in a motel in Tennessee at 3 a.m. when I was deciding whether to keep the access string or delete it and disappear completely somewhere no one would ever find me. She held his gaze. I thought about what he would do. My father. If he were me. She paused. He would have kept it. He raised you well, Adrian said. She was quiet for a moment, then softly. He really did. The next hour brought 3 developments in rapid succession, each arriving before the last had fully settled. The first was a call from Dominic at 11:43. Alan Price had been found. Not dead, located by a combination of Dominic's network and a flag that Marsh had put out through a channel specific enough not to trigger Whitmore's oversight. Price was at a motel in New Jersey, and he had not burned the bridge he was standing on as completely as he might have. He had taken documents with him. Copies of communications. The kind of documentation a man took when he was deciding whether running was his final option, or whether he had something left to trade. "He's going to flip," Adrian said. "That's Marsh's read too," Dominic said. "He's already sent someone." The second development came at 12:18 in the morning, and arrived not as a call, but as a text from a number that Adrian recognized as belonging to a contact embedded in a different kind of network, entirely the kind of network that monitored high-level private communications that were not supposed to be monitored. The text said, "Calder moved money. Offshore. 3 transfers in the last 4 hours." Adrian stared at that text for a long moment. He showed it to Elena. She read it, looked up. "He's running," she said. "He's preparing to run," Adrian said. "Moving money first. Then he'll move himself. If he gets offshore. He won't." Adrian picked up his phone. He called Marsh directly. Marsh answered on the first ring, which meant he hadn't been sleeping. "Calder is moving money," Adrian said. 3 offshore transfers in the last 4 hours. He knows the net is closing. You have maybe 12 hours before he tries to leave the country." A pause that was not Marsh being slow, but Marsh being fast enough to be processing 3 things simultaneously. "Where is he now?" "His primary residence in the city," Adrian said. "Dominic has eyes on the building. I need a warrant for his financials and an emergency travel restriction," Marsh said. "Both of which I can have in Daniel." Adrian's voice was level. "How fast?" 2 hours, Marsh said. "If the DAG signs off in the next 20 minutes, which she will because I'm calling her right now." "Then call her," Adrian said, and hung up. He looked at Elena. She was watching him with the particular alertness of someone who had understood every side of the conversation from one half of it. 2 hours, she said. "Yes. A lot can happen in 2 hours." "I know." She stood up. She had been sitting for a long time, and the movement was careful because of the ribs, which were not better yet. 3 days was not enough time for bruised ribs to stop being a presence, but she stood straight, and she looked at him with an expression that was not fear. "Is there anything else we can do in 2 hours?" she said. He thought about it. "Yes," he said. Thomas Redd's statement. He mentioned a property, a location in Connecticut that Calder used as an operations center. Something that doesn't appear in any official records. She was immediately focused. Records of what? Equipment, Redd had said. Adrian thought back through the 47 minutes. He said Calder had physical records there, not digital physical, because Calder did not trust digital for the things he most needed to protect. A second physical cache, Elena said. Possibly. He met her eyes. If Calder is moving money and preparing to run, and if there are physical records at that location, he'll destroy them before he leaves, she said. Yes. She picked up her jacket. He looked at her. Elena, the ribs are manageable. She met his eyes without apology. You know I'm right about the Connecticut location. If it exists and we lose it, I'm not taking you to Connecticut at midnight. You're not taking me anywhere. I'm going. She held his gaze with the particular directness of a woman who had spent 8 years making hard decisions alone and was not in the habit of waiting for permission. You said we. On the drive to Garfield Falls. Both of us. He looked at her. He thought about the stone behind the shelving unit, the bundle of documents in her hands, the way she had pressed it briefly to her chest before she turned to him. Joseph drives, he said. You don't move without telling me, and if I say we leave, we leave. Agreed, she said without hesitation. He picked up his phone and called Joseph. The third development came while Joseph was pulling the vehicle around, and it came from the last direction either of them expected. Dominic called. Calder just left his building, Dominic said. Adrian stopped. He went out the service exit at 12:41. One vehicle, private driver. No security team that we can see. A pause. Adrian, he's not going to the airport. Where is he going? He's heading north, Dominic said. On Route 9. The same road, the same direction as Garfield Falls. Elena was watching Adrian's face. She saw it change. She had gotten very good at reading his face in 3 days, and she read this one clearly. What? She said. He's coming north, Adrian said. Her eyes sharpened. He found out about Garfield Falls. Or he always knew and was waiting to move until he had no other options. Adrian was already thinking through it. Either Marco Vitelli told him, or Red told him, or Calder has intelligence we don't know about. He looked at her. He may be coming for the documents. The documents are in Marsh's hands, she said. He doesn't know that. She understood immediately. Calder was heading north because he believed the documents were still in Garfield Falls, or because he wanted to verify their destruction personally, or because he was operating on information that was hours behind reality. He's running toward a church that has nothing in it anymore, she said. Yes, Adrian said, and then more quietly. Unless that's not the only reason he's heading north. She looked at him. The Connecticut location, he said. If Red's information is accurate, it's between the city and here. He's not just going to Garfield Falls. He's doing both. He's destroying evidence and then disappearing. He looked at Dominic on the phone. Stay on his vehicle, he said. Do not engage. I want to know the moment he stops. Understood. He ended the call. Joseph was at the door. Elena put on her jacket. She looked at Adrian, and in her face was not excitement or recklessness, but the serious, clear-eyed focus of someone who had waited 8 years for the person responsible for her father's death to be in a position to face consequences, and who was not going to stand in the estate and watch it happen without her. Let's go, she said. He nodded. They went. Yet, the Connecticut location was 40 minutes south of the estate, on a road that became less populated the further from the highway it ran. It was a property registered to a subsidiary of a holding company that had no obvious connection to Victor Calder, which was the same mechanism Calder used for everything: distance layers, deniability. But Thomas Red had been inside it twice and remembered the address because he was the kind of man who remembered addresses, and Dominic had verified the registration chain in 20 minutes that afternoon. Joseph drove fast on the clear roads. Elena sat in the back and did not speak for the first 15 minutes. She was thinking. Adrian let her think. He was thinking too. At the 20-minute mark, his phone rang. Dominic. Calder stopped, Dominic said. At a property in Connecticut. I'm pulling the address. He gave it. It was the same address. Adrian looked at Elena. He's already there, he said. Her face went very still. How long ago did he arrive? He said into the phone. 8 minutes, Dominic said. Vehicle is still there. No movement since arrival. 8 minutes. How far are we? Adrian said to Joseph. 11 minutes, Joseph said. 11 minutes minus 8 was 3 minutes. Calder had 3 minutes before Adrian arrived. 3 minutes to destroy whatever was in that building. Adrian looked at Elena and she looked at him, and they both understood at exactly the same moment that 3 minutes was not a comfortable margin and was also all they had. Joseph, Adrian said. Faster? Joseph drove faster. They arrived in 9 minutes. The vehicle was there, a dark sedan engine, still warm, the kind of vehicle you used when you didn't want to be noticed. One of Adrian's people who had gotten there 90 seconds ahead of them from a different direction was at the perimeter. Adrian got out. He told Elena to stay in the vehicle. She looked at him. He looked back at her. Please, he said. It was one word, and he did not use it often, and she understood what it cost him. She stayed. He moved with Joseph and the 2 men on perimeter toward the building. The door was unlocked. Calder had gone in fast, in a hurry, not thinking about what he left open behind him. That was the particular mistake of a man who was panicking for the first time in a long time, who had spent 20 years in complete control, and was now discovering what it felt like when control ended. Victor Calder was in the back room. He was 64 years old, silver-haired, and he was standing in front of a filing cabinet with a lighter in his hand and a look on his face that was nothing like the composed, powerful man in the Foundation photographs. He looked like someone who had finally run out of room. He looked at Adrian. "Moretti," he said. "Mr. Calder," Adrian said. They looked at each other across the room. "You're too late," Calder said. His voice was still controlled, the final professional reflex of a man who had controlled his voice in difficult rooms for 2 decades. "Whatever you came for, what I came for," Adrian said, "is already in federal hands. Has been since 10 o'clock tonight." Calder went still. "The documents from the church in Garfield Falls," Adrian said. "Robert Vasquez's records, Sandra Park's index, the statements from Carla Mead and Thomas Red, Harriet Soames, who is currently in federal custody, the file from her floor safe." He paused. "And the access string for the encrypted digital archive that Robert Vasquez built for 2 years before you had him killed." Calder's hand tightened on the lighter. "You don't know that I know everything," Adrian said. It was quiet and absolute and completely certain. "And so does Daniel Marsh, and so does the Deputy Attorney General, and by morning, so will every relevant federal agency. The money you moved tonight has been flagged. Your travel is restricted as of 45 minutes ago." He watched Calder's face process this. "There is no version of tonight where you leave the country." The lighter in Calder's hand did not move. "The man who thought he was untouchable for 20 years, Adrian said. "A foundation, universities, children's hospitals." Something moved in his voice, not anger. Something colder and more precise. "And 8 years of hunting a woman who was trying to make her father's death mean something." Calder said nothing. "Elena Vasquez is outside," Adrian said. "She's been running from you for 8 years. She could have disappeared completely. She was good enough to do it. But she kept her father's records alive because she believed that eventually it had to matter." He paused. "It matters tonight." The lighter went onto the filing cabinet. Victor Calder sat down. It was the most significant thing Adrian had seen in 3 days. The moment a man who had stood at the center of a criminal empire for 20 years understood that it was over and sat down with the particular heaviness of someone who would not be getting back up. "I want a lawyer," Calder said. "Of course you do," Adrian said. He turned to Joseph. "Call Marsh," he said. He walked back out to the vehicle. Elena was sitting exactly where he had left her, and she watched him come back through the windshield, and when he opened the door, she read his face with the quick accuracy she had developed, and she said nothing for a moment. Then, "Did you get him?" "He's inside," Adrian said. "Marsh is sending people." She absorbed that. She looked at the building. She looked at Adrian. "I want to see him," she said. He looked at her. "Not to say anything," she said. "Not to confront him. I've been running from this man for 8 years. I've been afraid of a face I've never seen in person." She met his eyes. "I want to see him once. Just once. So the fear has a size." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he got out and offered her his hand. She took it. They walked into the building together, and she saw Victor Calder sitting in a chair in a back room of a building that had nothing to do with foundations or universities or power, looking like nothing more than an old man who had run out of road. She looked at him for 5 seconds. He looked back at her. Neither of them spoke. Then she turned and walked back out. In the cold night air outside the building, she stopped. She stood very still. And then, slowly, something that had been held rigid in her for 8 years, in her shoulders, in her jaw, in the controlled, careful posture of a woman who had not allowed herself to be seen as anything other than strong, released. Just slightly. Just enough to matter. Adrian stood beside her and said nothing, because nothing was what the moment required. After a while she said, "He looked smaller than I expected." "They always do," he said. She was quiet for another moment. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of vehicles approaching Marsh's people, coming fast down the rural road, headlights cutting through the dark. Elena looked at the sky. "Tomorrow," she said. "The Deputy Attorney General." "Tomorrow," he agreed. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. He shook his head slightly. "Don't." "I'm thanking you," she said. "Elena." "I'm thanking you," she said again, with the quiet firmness of someone who had decided to say a thing and was going to say it. "You didn't have to go out in the snow that night. You didn't have to carry me inside. You could have called an ambulance and kept your distance, and this would have been someone else's problem." She looked at him steadily. "You didn't, and I'm thanking you for it." He looked at her. The headlights were getting closer. "Your father built something that lasted 8 years, and crossed 6 states, and survived everything Calder threw at it," he said. "I just stopped someone from walking past it." She held his gaze. "Then we both did something right," she said. The vehicles arrived, and the night filled with people and movement, and the particular organized chaos of a federal operation beginning. And Adrian Moretti and Elena Vasquez stood outside the building where Victor Calder was waiting to be taken into custody. And the dark around them was clear and cold, and full of stars that had been there long before any of this and did not care about any of it. But the people standing under them did. And that it turned out was enough. The federal vehicles were still on the road outside when Daniel Marsh walked out of the building and found Adrian standing in the cold. He stopped beside him. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Inside, Marsh's people were processing Victor Calder photographing the filing cabinet, bagging the lighter that Calder had set down before he could use it. The night had the particular texture of something that had broken open and was still settling the way a room felt after a window shattered, all the pressure gone, replaced by something colder and more honest. 19 warrants by morning, Marsh said. That's the number Claire Hoban is working with right now. 19 individuals across 6 states. Calder, Soames, Whitmore, Weil, Price. When we find him and 14 others that cross-referencing the documents with Red's statement brought up that we didn't have before tonight. He paused. Your people are going to be asked to cooperate with the investigation. They will, Adrian said. Your own position. I know what my position is, Adrian said. It was not hostile. It was simply true. A man like Adrian Moretti could hand a corrupt senator to the federal government and still carry his own weight in a different kind of ledger. Marsh understood that. They both understood it. Handle Calder. Handle Whitmore. That's what matters. Marsh was quiet for a moment. Elena, he said. The meeting tomorrow with the DAG. She needs to be prepared for the fact that this is going to become public. Trials take time, but the arrests are going to make news. Her name will come out. I know, Adrian said. Tell her yourself. He turned and walked back to the vehicle. Elena was standing outside it now, not inside. She had gotten out while he was talking to Marsh, and she was standing in the cold, with her arms at her sides, and her face turned slightly upward, not looking at the stars, particularly just looking at the open dark, the way a person looked at the outside of something when they had been inside it for a very long time. He stood beside her. Marsh says 19 warrants by morning, he said. She absorbed that. Whitmore is on that list, she said. It was not a question. Whitmore is on that list. She nodded slowly. My father wrote in his notes that he thought there was someone in the Senate. He had the shape of it, but not the name. He wrote that if he could just get 2 more months. She stopped. 2 more months, and he would have had Whitmore. He ran out of time by 8 weeks. You finished it? Adrian said. She looked at him. We finished it. He said nothing to that. He did not correct her, and he did not agree, because both felt insufficient for what the 3 days between the snow and this moment had actually been. Marsh also said your name is going to come out, he said. When the trials begin, possibly before. She was quiet for a moment. I know, she said. I've been preparing for that for 8 years. A pause. I used to think about what it would feel like when I could use my real name again, when I could stop being Elena Voss and just be Elena. She looked at her hands. I couldn't quite imagine it. Can you now? She thought about that. Yes, she said. And then after a short pause, It's terrifying. He looked at her. Why terrifying? Because I've been running for 8 years. Running requires a very specific way of living. Every decision you make is about not being found. Every friend you don't make. Every place you don't stay. Everything you don't allow yourself. She looked at him. When the reason for running is gone, you have to figure out who you are without it. That's the terrifying part. He looked at her steadily. You have time to figure that out, he said. She looked back at him. Yes, she said. I do. They stood in the cold for another moment, and the federal vehicles continued their work around them, and the building that had been Victor Calder's last attempt at control gave up its contents piece by piece to people with badges and gloves and evidence bags. Then Elena said, "Take me home." He looked at her. Home was a word she had not used for 8 years. He understood what she meant by it in this moment, not permanently, not definitively, but tonight. The estate. The guest room with the lamp turned low. The kitchen where she had sat with cold tea in the early morning and told him things she had never told anyone. "Joseph," he said. Joseph was already at the car. They got back to the estate at 3 in the morning. Mrs. Fane was awake. Of course she was. She was standing in the kitchen with her reading glasses on, and a cup of tea she had been pretending to read next to, and when Adrian and Elena came through the door, she looked at Elena's face, and read it in the way she read everything completely, and without comment, and stood up and put the kettle back on. "Sit," she said to Elena. Elena sat. Mrs. Fane made tea the real way, not the perfunctory way with the same unhurried attention she applied to everything. She put the cup in front of Elena, and then she put a plate beside it with 2 slices of buttered toast because she was 71 years old and had managed this household through more difficult nights than most people knew existed, and she understood that the body needed something warm and simple when the mind had been carrying too much. Elena looked at the toast. Then she looked at Mrs. Fane. "Thank you," she said. Mrs. Fane patted her hand once briefly and went back to her chair. She picked up her book and put her reading glasses back on, and did not look at either of them again, which was the particular grace of a woman who understood exactly when presence and privacy were the same thing. Adrian sat across from Elena. She ate the toast. She drank the tea. She did both with the unself-conscious simplicity of someone who was too tired to perform anything and had stopped needing to. After a while, she said, "Tell me something about yourself." He looked at her. "Not about the business," she said. "Not about tonight. Something ordinary." He thought about that. "I can't cook," he said, "at all. Mrs. Fane has been feeding me for 9 years because the one time I tried to make dinner in this house, I apparently destroyed a pan in a way she still references." Elena looked at him. Then she laughed. It was quiet and brief and completely real, and it was the first time he had heard her laugh in 3 years and 3 days of knowing her, and it changed her face entirely, made her look for just a moment like the woman in the photograph from before she disappeared, the one who was 26 and open and unguarded. "A pan," she said. "She keeps it in a cabinet somewhere as a cautionary reminder," he said. "I'm not certain which cabinet." Elena shook her head. The smile stayed for a moment longer than the laugh. "Your turn," he said. She looked at her tea. "I used to paint," she said. "Watercolors mostly. I was not good at it. My father used to hang everything I made on the refrigerator the way parents do for children, except I was in college." She paused. "I haven't painted anything in 8 years. I didn't allow myself to buy supplies. You don't buy things that mark a place as somewhere you live. You can buy supplies now," he said. She looked at him. "You said it yourself," he said. "You're not running anymore." The words landed. She let them. "I know," she said quietly. "It just hasn't quite caught up to the rest of me yet." "It will," he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she finished her tea and said goodnight to Mrs. Fane, who did not look up from her book, but said goodnight back in a voice that communicated everything without saying any of it, and Elena went upstairs to the room that was no longer just the guest room. Adrian sat at the table for a while longer. Mrs. Fane turned a page. "She's a good woman," Mrs. Fane said to her book. "Yes," Adrian said. "She is." Mrs. Fane turned another page and said nothing else, which was, as with most things she said, and didn't say, exactly right. The morning broke cold and clear, and full of the particular urgency of things that had been set in motion and were now moving under their own weight. By 7 o'clock, Dominic had the overnight summary ready. Victor Calder was in federal custody. He had not said a word after asking for a lawyer, which was the decision of a man who understood his situation precisely and had calculated that silence was his only remaining strategy. He was not wrong about that. He was wrong about how much silence could protect him, given what was already in Marsh's hands, but that was a realization that would develop over the following weeks, in ways that Calder's lawyer would have to manage. Harriet Soames had not been as quiet. She had started talking before midnight, and had not stopped, which was the behavior of a woman whose insurance policy had just been removed from her possession, and who understood that the only remaining leverage she had was information. Marsh's people were documenting everything, and had already by 7 in the morning identified 2 names from Soames's statement that did not appear in any of the previous evidence. Thomas Redd's written statement had been completed and signed at 1 in the morning. Sandra Park had it. It was by her assessment the most detailed single document in the case. 41 pages of specific operational information, contacts, methods, dates. Redd had the memory of a man who had survived 6 years in a dangerous network by keeping track of everything, and he had put it all on paper with the thoroughness of someone who understood this was his last negotiating chip. Senator Paul Whitmore had been reached at his Georgetown residence at 6:15 in the morning by 2 federal agents carrying a warrant. He had, according to the agent's report, turned a specific shade of gray when he saw the warrant and had sat down without being asked and had said very quietly that he wanted to call his attorney. His chief of staff had arrived 20 minutes later and had immediately departed to make a series of calls that Marsh's team was monitoring. Alan Price had been found in New Jersey as expected and had done exactly what Adrian predicted he had traded. He had 3 hours of recorded conversations in his possession backups he had made without Calder's knowledge, and he had put them on the table as his opening offer. Marsh had accepted. Price's lawyer was currently negotiating the terms of cooperation, but the conversations were already being analyzed. Dominic finished the summary and looked up. "It's moving," he said. "Yes," Adrian said. "Faster than anything I've seen." "It was always going to move fast once it started," Adrian said. "The evidence was complete. It just needed someone to receive it." He looked at the summary. "What time is Elena's meeting with the DAG?" 10 o'clock. The office is sending a car at 9. "I'm going with her." Dominic made a note. "There's one more thing." Adrian looked at him. "Marco Vitelli," Dominic said. "He surfaced last night, in the city. He checked into a hotel under his own name, which is either a mistake or a gesture." "A gesture," Adrian said. "He's positioning himself to cooperate. He's watching the news, and he knows which way it's going, and he wants to be on the right side before the door closes." He thought about it. "Give his location to Marsh. Let the federal process handle it." Dominic nodded. "And the 6 from the first night," he said. "Same. All of them go to Marsh." He paused. "Including Carla Mead." Dominic was quiet for a moment. "She cooperated." "I know. That cooperation goes in her favor when Marsh's people assess her case. But she was part of the operation that put Elena in the snow, and the process handles that, not me." He held Dominic's gaze. "All of it goes through the right channels. Every piece of it." Dominic looked at him with the expression he sometimes had rare brief of someone seeing something in his employer that he found worth noting. "Understood," he said. Chum. Elena came downstairs at 8:15, dressed carefully in the clothes that Mrs. Fane had quietly arranged, not her maid's uniform, which she had not worn since the night of the storm, but clothes that belonged to her without the context of a role. She looked like herself, which was a sentence that had not been true for 8 years, and she knew it, and it showed in the particular way she held herself, not differently exactly, but more completely. She found Adrian in the study going through Dominic's summary. "The DAG meeting," she said. "9 o'clock car," he said. "I'm coming." She looked at him. "You don't have to, Elena." He said it simply and she stopped. She looked at him for a moment. "All right," she said. He put the summary down. "Dominic briefed me on the overnight. Whitmore was picked up this morning." She absorbed that without expression. Then quietly, "Has it been on the news? It will be by noon." She nodded. "When my name comes out." She said, "People from my old life are going to look for me. People from before." She paused. "I had friends. Before. A graduate program I never finished. A life that I set down one day and never picked back up." She looked at the window. "I've been so focused on what I was carrying that I forgot to think about what I left behind." "You were surviving," he said. "Yes." She paused. "My supervisor at the graduate program, a woman named Dr. Patricia Kellner. She was the reason I chose that program. She was extraordinary. She probably thinks I simply disappeared. Dropped out. Students did that sometimes." She paused. "I'd like to write her a letter, eventually, when it's appropriate, to explain." "You don't owe anyone an explanation," he said. "I know I don't owe it," she said. "I want to give it." She looked at him. "There's a difference." He held her gaze. "Yes, there is." She picked up her coffee. "What happens to you after all this? When the federal process is running and the trials are scheduled and everything is in motion?" She looked at him steadily. "You handed a senator to the Justice Department, Adrian. You provided evidence that implicates people across 6 states. The kind of people who look for leverage. I know. They'll look for leverage against you. They'll try," he said. "They've tried before. The difference is that Daniel Marsh now owes me something significant, and the DAG is about to understand that I handed her the most important case of her career." He paused. "That's a different kind of leverage." She studied him. "You're not worried," she said. "I'm always worried," he said. "I just don't let it make decisions for me." She looked at him with the expression she had when she was reading something underneath what was being said, the specific attention of a woman who had spent 8 years developing the ability to see past surfaces. "You're also not the same person you were 4 days ago," she said quietly. He was still for a moment. "No," he said. "I'm not." She didn't ask him to elaborate. She didn't need to. She had been in the same house with him for 4 days, and she was good enough at reading people to know what had changed and why, and she was honest enough not to pretend she didn't see it. "We should go," she said. "I don't want to be late." He stood. The meeting with Deputy Attorney General Catherine Rourke lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes, which was an hour and 40 minutes longer than scheduled, and by the end of it, the room contained 4 people, who were all looking at each other with the specific expression of individuals who had just completed something very large and were feeling the combined weight of its completion and its implication. Rourke was 60 small with white hair. She wore short and gray eyes that were the most attentive Adrian had seen in a long time. She had read Sandra's index before they arrived. She had the documents in front of her, handled with gloves, and she had asked questions that went to the precise center of things, without any of the preamble that political conversations usually required. She asked Elena most of the questions, not Adrian. Elena, because Elena was the one who had carried it, and Rourke understood that, and she asked her questions with the specific respect of someone who knew that the woman across the table had done something that most people could not have done, would not have attempted, would have abandoned years ago. Elena answered every question directly. She did not hedge, did not soften, did not frame things for protection. 8 years of carrying this had given her a clarity about it that was almost architectural. She knew every corner of it, every connection, every weak point, and every solid foundation. She answered the way her father had documented precisely thoroughly, with the particular confidence of someone who had verified everything she knew and had stopped confusing what she knew with what she hoped. At the end of the second hour, Rourke sat back. I've been building this case for 7 months, she said. I had the financial architecture. I had Whitmore's voting record cross-referenced against Calder's financial movements. I had the pattern. She paused. What I didn't have was Robert Vasquez's documentation, which ties the pattern to specific individuals with specific transactions. She looked at Elena. Your father's work is the cornerstone of the federal case. Without it, we have a strong circumstantial argument. With it, we have certainty. Elena was very still. His name will be in the record, Rourke said. Robert Vasquez, the source of the documentary evidence. The public filings, the trial records, the historical account of this case. His name will be in all of it. She paused. I want you to know that. Elena's jaw moved very slightly. Thank you, she said. No, Rourke said. And she said it with the particular weight of someone who understood what it cost a person to do what Robert Vasquez had done and what Elena Vasquez had done in his wake. Thank you. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Rourke looked at Adrian. Mr. Moretti, she said. Your cooperation in this matter is going to be part of the federal record. That creates certain complications for your own legal position that I want to be honest with you about. I know, he said. I can offer. I'm not asking for anything, he said. The information was given because it was the right thing to do with it. I don't need it to be a transaction. Rourke looked at him for a long moment. That's an unusual position for someone in your situation, she said. I'm aware, he said. She studied him for another second. Then she looked at Elena and back at Adrian, and something crossed her face that was brief and complicated, and not quite professional. The expression of someone who was also a human being, and who had just observed something between two people that went past the case file. All right, she said. And that was all she said about it. Dag. They were in the car heading back north when Elena's phone rang. She looked at the number. She didn't recognize it. She almost didn't answer. 8 years of not answering unknown numbers had built a reflex that was hard to override. But the reflex was from a different world, the running world, the hiding world, and she answered. Elena Vasquez. A woman's voice, older, careful. Yes, Elena said. This is Patricia Kellner. The car went very still around Elena in the particular way of the world, stopping for a second when something unexpected happened. Dr. Patricia Kellner, her graduate supervisor, the woman she had been thinking about this morning at the estate. I'm sorry to call directly, Kellner said. I've had a notification from the university they contacted former students whose files had been suspended in connection with. She paused. Elena, your name is appearing in federal communications that are becoming public. I wanted to call before the news did. Elena looked at her hands. Dr. Kellner, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything, Kellner said. And her voice had the same particular warmth that Elena had remembered for 8 years, not sentimental, but genuine in the way of people who had spent their lives in rooms full of ideas and had developed a corresponding respect for people who carried difficult ones. I just wanted you to know that your position in the program has been held, administratively. I made certain of it. A pause. I didn't know why you left, but I knew it wasn't because you wanted to. Elena closed her eyes for 1 second. How did you know that? She said. Because I knew your work, Kellner said. And I knew your father's work peripherally, his reputation in his field. People don't leave things they love without a reason. A pause. I'm glad you're safe. Elena was quiet for a long moment. I'd like to come back, she said. When everything is settled, when I can. She paused. I don't know if that's possible. It's possible, Kellner said immediately. The program will still be here. I will still be here. A pause. Take care of yourself first. The rest will wait. Elena hung up. Adrian did not ask. He waited. After a while, she said, That was my graduate supervisor. I gathered, he said. She looked out the window. She held my position. For 8 years, she held my position. A pause. She didn't know why I left. She just knew it wasn't by choice. She knew you well, he said. She did. Elena paused. I've spent 8 years believing that everything I walked away from was gone. That you couldn't put something down for that long and pick it back up. She looked at him. Maybe that's not true. Things that belong to you tend to wait, he said. She looked at him steadily. Is that something you believe, or something you're saying for my benefit? Both, he said. The faintest smile crossed her face. She looked back out the window. I'm going to need somewhere to stay, she said. After this. Not permanently, I understand that the estate is your home, not mine. But while the federal process is running and my name is public and everything is still... She stopped. I can't go to an apartment. Not yet. The estate is your home for as long as you need it, he said. She turned to look at him. Adrian, she said. Elena. He held her gaze. You worked in that house for 3 years. You are not a guest in it. You are not an obligation. He paused. You're the person who sat in my kitchen at 2 a.m. and told me the truth about everything when you didn't have to, and who gave me the access string to the most important thing you carried because you trusted me with it. He held her gaze. The estate is yours for as long as you want it to be. She was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, she said. He looked at the road. Stop thanking me, he said. I'll stop thanking you when you stop doing things worth thanking you for, she said. He said nothing to that, but something shifted in his expression, very slight, very brief. That was the closest he came to a smile that wasn't for a room full of people who needed to see one. The first news report hit at 12:18. Dominic called Adrian with the alert while they were still in the car, and Adrian put it on speaker so Elena could hear, and they both listened as a reporter's voice read the opening of a story that was going to get significantly larger over the following hours. Federal charges filed. Victor Calder. Financial crimes. Racketeering. 20-year criminal network. Senator Paul Whitmore named as co-conspirator. Harriet Soames in custody. Ongoing investigation spanning 6 states. Elena listened to the whole thing without moving. When it ended, she said, They'll run his name. Your father's name, Adrian said. Yes, within the day. She nodded. Robert Vasquez, she said, quietly, like she was testing how it felt to say it out loud in a world where it was becoming public. People are going to know who he was, what he did. Yes, Adrian said. She pressed her lips together. Then very quietly, he would have hated the attention. Probably, Adrian said. He was the most private person I knew. She paused. He would have hated the attention, and he would have been so... She stopped, started again. He would have been glad, she said. Underneath the discomfort, he would have been so glad it mattered. The car was quiet. It matters, Adrian said. She looked at him. I know, she said. I can feel it mattering. She paused. That's new. It's been abstract for so long, the idea that it would matter someday eventually. Now it's actual. It's today. A pause. That's hard to get used to. He looked at her. You have time to get used to it, he said. She looked back out the window. 8 years, she said. 8 years ago today. Not today exactly, but this week. 8 years ago, I deleted the email my father sent me and memorized the string in it and booked a bus ticket to a city I had never been to and started running. She paused. I thought it would be weeks. A few months maybe until someone with the right authority made it their problem. Her voice was even. 8 years. Adrian said nothing. I want to be angry about that, she said. Some days I am. 8 years of my life gone. The things I didn't do. The person I didn't get to be. She paused. But then I think about my father choosing to document it. Choosing to spend 2 years of his life on something that he knew could cost him everything. And I think if he could make that choice, I can endure the consequences of it." She turned to look at Adrian. "He didn't lose those 2 years. He spent them. There's a difference." He held her gaze. "And the 8 years," he said. She thought about it. "I spent them too," she said. "I spent them keeping his work alive. I spent them surviving so that this moment today, this week, could happen." She paused. They weren't lost. They were the cost of the thing being worth something. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, not admiration exactly, because admiration implied surprise, and she did not think he was surprised by her anymore. Something more like recognition. The recognition of someone seeing a thing they understood deeply reflected back at them from an unexpected direction. "Your father would have been proud of you," he said. She looked out the window. "I know," she said, and that was the truest thing either of them said for the rest of the drive. 2 weeks passed. In those 2 weeks, the thing that had broken open on a January night in northern New York became slowly, and then all at once, the largest federal corruption case in a decade. The New York Times ran it on the front page 3 mornings in a row. 2 national magazines began profile pieces. Legal analysts described the scope of the indictments as historic. Marsh held a press conference that was precise and controlled and revealed exactly what needed to be revealed, and nothing else, which was the manner of a prosecutor who understood that cases were won in courtrooms, not in briefings. Senator Paul Whitmore resigned on the 7th day. He released a statement through his attorney that admitted nothing but made clear that he would not be running for re-election, a statement so carefully worded that it generated more coverage than a confession would have. The resignation itself was a kind of admission, and the country knew it. Harriet Soames's cooperation agreement was finalized on the 9th day. She would testify. Her testimony would reach corners of the network that not even Carla Mead or Thomas Red had known about, because Soames had been the thread that ran through everything, and she had documented it all. Victor Calder's attorney filed a motion to suppress on the 11th day, which Marsh's office opposed, which a federal judge denied on the 14th day. The motion had never had a real chance, and everyone involved knew it. It was the procedural motion of a man managing his situation, with the professionalism of someone who had run out of real options and was now playing for time and terms. On the 14th day, Daniel Marsh called Adrian. "The Dague wants the case to go to trial," he said. "Full trial, full record public proceedings. No plea for the primary defendants." He paused. "That means it's going to be long and public, and everything connected to it is going to be examined." "I know," Adrian said. "Elena is the most significant living witness to the documentary evidence," Marsh said. "The chain of custody, her father's collection, her preservation of it, her 8 years of protecting it, that testimony is going to be essential." "She knows that," Adrian said. "She'll have federal protection for the duration." "She doesn't need federal protection," Adrian said. "She's at the estate." A pause. "Adrian," Marsh said carefully. "That's a long time for someone to be—" "She's at the estate," he said again, the same simple certainty he used for things that were not under discussion. A pause. "All right," Marsh said. Elena was in the study on the 14th day when he came back from the call. She had taken to using the study in the afternoons. Adrian had not suggested it. She had simply begun appearing there with her laptop and her coffee, reading the filings and the updates and the coverage with the focused attention of someone who needed to understand every development in real time. He had said nothing about it because it was her case and she had earned the right to follow it exactly as closely as she chose. She looked up when he came in. He told her about the call, about the trial, about the testimony. She listened without interrupting. "Full trial," she said when he finished. "Full trial," he confirmed. She nodded slowly. "I expected that." She paused. "Good. I want it on the record. All of it. My father's name in the federal record connected to what he actually did. Not a footnote, the actual account." She looked at her laptop. "How long?" "Marsh says the preparation phase alone is 8 to 12 months. Trial could be another year after that." 2 years, she said. Possibly. She absorbed that. Then she looked at him. Adrian, she said. He waited. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly, she said. Not protectively, honestly. All right, he said. Is this my being here the case? The federal involvement, everything that's happening, is any of it creating a problem for you that you're not telling me about? He looked at her steadily. Marsh is managing the federal boundary carefully, he said. My cooperation is documented as informational, not operational. There are parts of my world that are not in this case and will not be. He paused. The people who might consider using this moment to move against me are weighing the fact that I just helped dismantle the network that protected several of their own interests, which creates a complicated incentive structure. He met her eyes. I am not in danger. You are not a liability to me. That's not entirely what I asked, she said. I know, he said. What you're asking underneath it is whether you should feel responsible for anything that comes back on me from this. She held his gaze. And the answer, he said, is no. Nothing that happens as a result of me choosing to carry you in from the snow is your fault. It was my choice. I made it fully informed. He paused. And I would make it again. She looked at him for a long moment. The study was quiet around them. The afternoon light was coming through the windows at the low angle of a January sun that had never gotten very high. Somewhere in the house, Mrs. Fane was doing what she always did, moving through the domestic rhythms of a household that had changed in 3 weeks, in ways that were both significant and invisible, the way the most important changes always were. I went out and bought watercolors yesterday, Helena said. He looked at her. Mrs. Fane drove me to the art supply store in town, she said. I bought watercolors and 2 brushes and a small pad of paper. She paused. I painted something last night. It was terrible. I am extremely out of practice. The smallest smile. But I did it. He looked at her. What did you paint? He said. She paused for just a moment. A church, she said. In winter. Small white buildings, snow on the ground. She held his gaze. The stone wall and the door. She paused. My father's hiding place. I wanted to paint it before I forgot exactly what it looked like, before the memory of it softened. He was quiet. It was terrible, she said again. I don't believe that, he said. She looked at him with the faint expression of someone deciding whether to share something. Then she reached into the small bag beside the chair and took out a piece of watercolor paper, small and slightly bent at the corner, and she put it on the desk between them. It was not terrible. It was careful and quiet, and done in the spare way of someone whose skill had not left them entirely, even if the practice had, and it had the particular quality of something made not to be seen, but to be held, a private picture, the kind you made for yourself when you needed to process something the mind couldn't do alone. The church was there. Small. Winter. The stone wall, the low fence. The pale winter light coming from the upper left. The way light actually came that morning, not the way you would arrange it for effect. He looked at it for a long time. It's not terrible, he said. It's a little terrible, she said. But she was looking at it with the expression of someone who had made something and was glad they had made it. He left it on the desk. She picked up her coffee. Outside, the January afternoon was doing what January afternoons did in northern New York, going dark early and cold, the light draining fast from a sky that would be completely black by 5:30. In the city, 2 hours south, the federal machinery was running. In courtrooms and law offices and government buildings, the case that Robert Vasquez had built in secret was becoming public property, the property of the record, the property of history. In the study, Elena Vasquez, who was no longer Elena Voss, who had stopped running 3 weeks ago on the coldest night of the winter, who had carried her father's evidence for 8 years through 6 states and 4 attempts to stop her, drank her coffee and looked at the small watercolor on the desk, and was for the first time in a very long time somewhere that felt like a place she could stay. Months later, when people asked about the Calder case, and people asked often because it was the kind of case that got written about and talked about and used as a reference point for what federal corruption could look like and what it took to bring it down. The story they told was about documents, about a financial network, about a senator who resigned and a lawyer who cooperated, and a prosecutor who built something airtight. They did not always tell the part about the woman in the snow. But the people who knew the full account knew that the woman in the snow was where all of it started. That Elena Vasquez had arrived at Adrian Moretti's estate 3 years before the storm, carrying a secret in her memory, and her father's key in her head, and that she had survived inside a house full of people who did not know what she carried, and one person who had been placed there specifically to find her. And they knew that on a January night, she had been hurt badly enough that she couldn't reach the gate, and that the most feared man in northern New York had walked out into a storm and found her and carried her in and asked the only question that mattered. Not what secret are you carrying? Not what are you worth to me? Not how do I use this? Just who hurt her? And everything that followed the warrants and the trials and the senator's resignation and the network's collapse and the record that would carry Robert Vasquez's name for as long as the case existed. Every piece of it came from that one question asked in the snow by a man who had not expected to care and had cared anyway. Elena Vasquez took the stand 8 months later in a federal courtroom in New York City, in front of a full gallery and a judge who had read the case file twice before the proceedings began. And she told the truth about her father and about the documents, and about 8 years of carrying something that most people would have set down long ago, and her voice did not waver once. When she stepped down from the stand, Adrian was in the gallery. He had been there every day of the trial. He did not sit in the front. He sat where he could see the room and not draw attention, which was where he sat by nature in most rooms. And when Elena came down from the stand, and her eyes found his across the gallery, she did not smile, and he did not nod, and neither of them did anything that required interpreting. They just looked at each other for 1 second. The kind of look that said it happened the way it was supposed to happen. The kind of look that said your father's work is in the record now where it belongs. The kind of look that said you are not running anymore. Victor Calder was convicted on all counts 14 months after his arrest. The verdict came back in 3 hours and 40 minutes, which was, Marsh said afterward, the fastest jury deliberation he had seen on a case of this complexity. Sandra Parks' index had made the evidence so clear that 3 hours was actually long enough for lunch and a thorough reading of the verdict form. Harriet Soames received a reduced sentence in recognition of her cooperation, which was the outcome she had been working toward, and which she accepted without the gratitude or the remorse that would have required her to admit what she had done. Senator Paul Whitmore pleaded guilty 8 months into the trial process, when his attorneys had finished reading the evidence and had advised him that the count of the people willing to testify against him made a conviction more certain than any case they had ever seen. He received 7 years. He served 4. That was the part of the story that the people who had loved and trusted him struggled with most. The other part they struggled with was simpler and older, how they had not seen it. Thomas Red received cooperation credit and supervised release, which was the outcome of 41 pages of detailed testimony and a decision made on a night in January in a room with a metal table to finally tell the truth about all of it. Carla Mead received cooperation credit and a reduced sentence, which she served quietly and completely, and when she was released, she moved to a state she had never worked in and took a job that had nothing to do with the world she had come from. She sent Elena one letter. Elena read it twice and kept it. Alan Price fled his cooperation agreement 18 months in and was found in Portugal, which was neither a surprise nor a satisfying ending, but it was the ending that the evidence supported, and the evidence was what mattered. And Elena Vasquez enrolled back in her graduate program in the fall of the year the trial ended. Dr. Patricia Kellner met her at the door of the department on the first day and shook her hand and said simply, "Welcome back." And Elena had stood in that doorway for a moment, feeling the particular weight of a thing that had been waiting and was now being picked back up, and she had said, "Thank you for holding it." "It was worth holding," Kellner said. And that was true. The estate in northern New York was quieter than it had been. Not empty, it was never empty. It was a household, and a household had its rhythms, but quieter in the way that places became quiet when the particular urgency that had occupied them for a while had resolved into something slower and more ordinary. Mrs. Fane still made breakfast. Dominic still delivered morning summaries. Joseph still drove when driving was required. And Elena still came to the estate on weekends, and on the weeks when the trial prep required her to be in the city, and on the Thursday nights when there was no particular reason, except that the study was quiet and the coffee was good, and there was a person there who had asked the right question on the coldest night of the winter and had not walked away from the answer. She brought her watercolors one Saturday in March. She set them up at the table in the study, which she did without asking permission, because she did not need permission, and she painted for 2 hours while Adrian worked at the desk across the room, and neither of them talked much, and the quiet between them was the very best kind, the kind that didn't need filling, that was full of something on its own. She painted the church again. Better this time. The practice had come back faster than she expected. When she finished, she held it up. Adrian looked at it from across the desk. "Better," he said. "Much better." She agreed with the particular satisfaction of someone reclaiming a thing they had been good at and finding it was still there. She set it down. She looked at it for a moment. "My father used to say that the truth had weight," she said. "That it was the heaviest thing a person could carry, but that carrying it was the only way it went anywhere." She paused. "He was right about the weight. And the going somewhere," Adrian said. She looked at him. The study was quiet. The afternoon light was coming through the windows at the angle of a March sun that was starting finally to climb higher than January allowed. Outside the estate grounds, the last of the winter snow was going dissolving slowly into the earth, and underneath it, the ground was doing what it always did when the cold finally broke, beginning without announcement or ceremony, to become something different. "And the going somewhere," she said. "He was right about that too." That was the truth that Robert Vasquez had given his life to carry, and that his daughter had carried after him across 8 years and 6 states and 4 attempts to stop her. And that had finally arrived in a federal courtroom, in the record, in the public account of what had been done, and what it had cost, and what it had ultimately irreversibly become. The truth had gone somewhere, and the woman who had carried it was no longer running. She was home.